Audiobook title Sorcery Monarch 01-359 by Falcon Par 04. He turned down a command post, returning home with the belongings of his fallen comrades and his own disappointment. Over the years, all the money Arnold had earned, aside from what was needed for his family, was sent to the widows of his fallen comrades. Despite the unconditional support from his family, when his grandchildren, who had the potential to become professionals, couldn't advance further due to the high cost of tuition, Arnold found himself in a dilemma. Fortunately, Arnold's luck held out, and through inside sources, he learned that the notoriously generous Adam Smith was recruiting people. With a monthly salary exceeding 50 gold coins and a one-time bonus of over 1,000 gold coins. Believing he had little time left, Arnold didn't hesitate to sell himself cleanly. At first, he thought that the mysterious Arcane Lord only wanted to train some soldiers to act as guards and caretakers during a transition. Perhaps in a few years, the Arcane Lord, tired of the hassle, would dismiss an old man like him. But after just a few days of training the soldiers, Arnold realized he was wrong. And very wrong. "This is where my true journey begins," the unyielding Arnold proudly wrote to his children. Chapter 104. The Power of Example. Chapter 104. The Power of Example. Arnold was quite satisfied with the soldiers' rigorous training. While guiding their training, he also carefully monitored their physical condition. This was not only to ensure the quality of their training, but also to prevent overexertion. Walking back and forth, Arnold felt full of energy, and he was generous with his praise for all the hardworking soldiers. However, when he saw the 14th soldier collapse from exhaustion, a flicker of concern crossed his eyes. Arnold ordered the soldiers whose bodies could no longer endure to rest, and as he looked into their hopeful eyes, he sternly forbade them from continuing. After hesitating for a moment, Arnold seemed to make a firm decision and walked toward Matthew, who stood at the front of the training camp. "My lord, just training like this won't work. The intensity is too high and their bodies can't take it. If we keep this up, the soldiers will collapse and start coughing up blood." Looking at Matthew's calm expression, Arnold grew slightly anxious. Scratching his head, he helplessly explained, "It's like those pioneers. If they only eat bread, their bodies won't last. They need to eat meat to keep going." Matthew didn't interrupt Arnold. Instead, he nodded in agreement, impressed with Arnold's knowledge as a true training instructor. As expected, even without formal education in this area, smart people can still derive practical insights. Perhaps, if Arnold had the gift for spellcasting, he could have become an exceptional bloodline-focused arcane mage. Seeing the hesitation on Arnold's face, Matthew knew he wouldn't bring this up without reason. Smiling, he asked, "What do you need me to do? Once you have the initiative, some things become much easier." Facing Matthew's deep, dark eyes, Arnold found it hard to understand his young lord. Still, he swallowed his concerns and said boldly, "We need to provide these soldiers with magical plant extracts or the flesh of magical creatures. The latter is too expensive, but the former is more affordable." Matthew looked deeply at Arnold. Noticing Arnold's slight unease, he turned to Ralph and said, "Meet all of Arnold's requests as best as you can. If anything is missing, come directly to me." After finishing, Matthew saw the delighted expression on Arnold's face and added, "Additionally, based on the cost savings from the equivalent effect of magical creature flesh, deducting the base cost, 10% of the savings will be rewarded to Arnold. Permanent production, permanently effective." Before Arnold could respond, Matthew continued to address his shocked expression. "Thank you, Arnold, for solving this problem for us. This is a reward for anyone who contributes, and it applies to everyone." Arnold understood Matthew's intent and nodded in a daze, his mind filled with racing thoughts. "If I refuse or reduce the benefits, others might blame me, and the Lord wouldn't be happy either. If it's not too much money, I should be able to accept it without guilt. If it's too much, I can find a way to deal with it later. But this Lord is really different from other spellcasters. He cares this much about the soldiers. No matter how I look at it, this is a great opportunity." Ralph smiled as he watched, though he had his doubts. Nevertheless, he trusted the Lord's decision and began discussing details with Arnold. Thanks to the abundance of resources from the Dark Forest and the hard work of the adventurers, Bay Village had accumulated a considerable amount of magical plants. Most of the ingredients for Arnold's magical plant extract formula could be easily sourced. But as is often the case, things didn't go as planned. Despite Ralph's efforts, he had no choice but to approach Matthew. "My lord, there's still one magical plant missing. It can be found in the Dark Forest, but it's deep within Troll Valley." Troll Valley. Glancing at the soldiers who were already showing signs of exhaustion, Matthew narrowed his eyes slightly. -3 luck value. Deep within Troll Valley. Developing Troll Valley. Everything's lining up. After observing for the morning, Matthew left the training camp. Before leaving, Matthew instructed Arnold to announce, "The fastest learners among the professionals will form a special team to participate in the development of Troll Valley and will receive extra rewards. Leon has already earned his spot, so I hope everyone gives their best effort. Also, remember to rest when needed. Don't overwork yourselves. If you injure yourselves or slow your learning due to overexertion, the only one who loses out will be you. Matthew deliberately didn't specify any rankings, hoping to motivate all professionals to push themselves harder. With Leon as a role model, all the professionals were now working even more diligently. Everyone wanted to succeed, to keep pace with their lord. This wasn't just recognition, it was an honor. The power of example is endless. Some of the soldiers, however, were feeling a bit helpless, frustrated with their bodies not being strong enough. Arnold kept a close eye on them, preventing any soldiers from overexerting themselves. As Matthew had said, everyone will die and every soldier could fall in battle, but they won't die because of something unnecessary. Returning to the lab, the tireless Mountain was still hard at work. Thanks to his understanding and growth in alchemy, Mountain's production of blood-replenishing potions was now about 80% as effective as Matthew's. Compared to the rigid bodies of the other clay golems, Mountain's smaller yet more flexible form allowed him to use all the alchemical tools skillfully. He had now become quite proficient at mass-producing blood-replenishing potions. More interestingly, though Mountain seemed somewhat mechanical, he maintained an impressive level of stability when crafting the potions. His success rate and potion effectiveness were unknowingly improving. Truly, he was an exceptional tool, chosen by fate. Watching Mountain busily at work, Matthew's gaze drifted to the alchemical tools, and a bold idea suddenly came to mind. Maybe in the future, I can have Mountain oversee a spell-controlled production line. Wait, a Mage Tower's Tower Spirit could also handle automated production of supplies. Indeed, everything shares certain similarities. After a brief moment of reflection, Matthew moved to another part of the lab. Now he needed to prepare various items for the upcoming adventure. Adventure is never a joke. It's not just a trip you take on a whim. If you take it lightly, it will take your life. Chapter 105, Advanced Magic Item Crafting. Chapter 105, Advanced Magic Item Crafting, to provide better conditions for the soldiers and ensure their survival in battle. Clean food and water, clothing, blankets, tents, and other basic supplies are not enough. In the dangerous Troll Valley, besides the man-eating, powerful and deadly trolls, there are many other dangerous and lethal magical creatures. Apart from ordinary weapons and gear, Matthew needed to prepare special potions, magical items, spell scrolls, and most importantly, enchanted weapons and armor. After all, his doppelganger wasn't afraid of death, but his soldiers only had one life. Currently, Matthew's magic item crafting skill had reached 98, putting him at the peak of intermediate level. He could now steadily craft basic magical items, tools, potions, and spell scrolls. He had handed over the production of blood-replenishing potions entirely to Mountain, because crafting those potions no longer improved his skill level. His next task was to prepare enchanted equipment for the professionals. Crafting magical equipment falls under magic item crafting, which generally consists of two parts. One part is the creation of the physical object itself, such as weapons, armor, accessories, and tools. The other part is the enchantment applied to the surface or interior of the item. In most cases, even an alchemist with extensive knowledge and strong hands-on skills would specialize in just one area. And for most enchanters, to balance their spell research, they focus more on the enchantment aspect. This is because enchantment is closely tied to spellcasting. In fact, enchantment itself cannot be separated from the aid of spellcasting. Matthew was preparing to enchant a batch of weapons and armor. He didn't jump straight to difficult challenges. He was only preparing to enchant a batch of spears and longswords with the Tier 1 spell Sharpen. Matthew took out a longsword and, as usual, checked its quality. Refined iron longsword, excellent quality, made from refined iron mixed with bronze, attack +2, sharpness +1, durability +1, market value 5 gold coins. Weapons of this caliber were the best that most soldiers could use. Even if there were better weapons, they wouldn't be able to wield them effectively. This batch of weapons was purchased by Adam Smith. It wasn't that Bay Village couldn't produce its own weapons and equipment. Thanks to the efforts of 2 master blacksmiths and many mid-level blacksmiths, Bay Village Armory was now capable of producing excellent quality spears and shields. However, Matthew had only tasked the armory with experimenting in weapon and equipment production, allowing them to train new blacksmiths and improve their craftsmanship. This was because Matthew didn't want to expose the existence of the iron mine yet. Without sufficient strength to protect it, revealing it would be tantamount to suicide. Matthew then took out some obsidian powder and mixed it with troll blood. Once thoroughly blended into a faintly glowing dark red, he sprinkled in ruby powder and continued stirring. Setting that aside, Matthew took out a silver rod and carefully traced it along the center of the longsword. As the silver rod scraped against the sword, a faint, sizzling sound was heard, and a bright silver line began to appear under the light. The silvery line gradually formed a complex, mysterious pattern resembling a spell model. Matthew's movements were steady, thanks to his strong attributes, and about 2 minutes later, the design was complete. This design corresponded to the Tier 1 spell Sharpen, but this was only the first step. Progress was at 10%. Matthew laid the sword flat and carefully dripped some of the dark red liquid onto the pattern. The round droplets were slowly absorbed by the silver design, gradually disappearing from sight. The previously silver design now faintly glowed with a reddish hue. Under Matthew's watchful eye, as more of the liquid was absorbed, the pattern deepened in red and even began to emit a faint light. Enchantment progress plus 1%. Now at 12%, enchantment progress plus 1%. Now at 13%, enchantment. About 50 milliliters of the liquid were completely absorbed by the seemingly insignificant design, which now shone brightly, blood red and dazzling. Matthew knew that this was the sharpened spell in its activated state. At this stage, it was only hovering on the surface of the sword, and its power would dissipate quickly. Now step 2 was complete, with progress reaching 50%. This step could normally be replaced by using a spell scroll, but Matthew's method was a bit more challenging, though it had one key advantage. Even an enchanter without spellcasting ability could use this method to produce enchanted items. This technique was also something researched by players. Many real-world scientists believed that arcane magic and spells were phenomena, rules, and principles of power. If you understood the knowledge itself, even without mana, you could find alternative methods. Just like in the real world. Except in the real world, converting knowledge into power required more tools. In this world, spellcasters were the tools themselves. As the light stabilized, Matthew placed the sword into a blazing fire. Once the sword turned red-hot, the glowing arcane pattern fused with the blade itself. During this process, Matthew carefully rotated the sword to ensure even heating, while preserving the integrity of the enchantment design. Simultaneously, he evenly sprinkled some magic crystal powder over the blade, which emitted small flashes of light as it landed. The glowing sword gradually became translucent, and the arcane pattern's light stabilized. This was a slow process, testing both the enchanter's control over heat and their understanding of the materials. It was Matthew's first time attempting such control, but fortunately, the system's data display allowed him to track progress and status accurately. Flame temperature slightly too high. Switch the heated area. Energy infusion is a bit slow. Add more magic crystal powder. Drawing from his experience crafting blood-replenishing potions, Matthew followed the system's prompts and steadily completed the final steps of the enchantment. The glowing red light gradually cooled, revealing a much brighter sword. Comparing it to the original longsword, Matthew smiled broadly. Refined iron enchanted longsword, excellent quality, made from refined iron mixed with bronze. Enchantment. Sharpen, attack plus 4, sharpness plus 3, durability plus 2, market value 180 gold coins. The attack power had doubled, sharpness increased by plus 2, and durability by plus 1, with the weapon's value multiplied many times over. Even after deducting the nearly 20 gold coins in enchantment material costs, the profit was still over 150 gold coins. What is true profit? This is the profit of war supplies. Announcement: a big thank you to Cosmic Duck for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 106, Departure to Troll Valley. Chapter 106, Departure to Troll Valley. The most important point was that after successfully crafting the enchanted longsword, a pleasant notification sounded in Matthew's ears. Ding. Enchanted longsword successfully crafted. Magic item crafting level plus 2 now at 100. Advanced magic item crafting. Increases magic item crafting success rate by 20%, with a 5% chance of crafting enhanced magic items. With a raised eyebrow of surprise, Matthew rubbed the slightly glowing enchanted longsword and turned his attention to the remaining materials and equipment. It was time to spend gold coins and boost skills again. Happy times. Bang! The uncontrolled magic surged wildly, tearing open cracks in the sturdy longsword, which then exploded. Sharp fragments flew in all directions under the explosive force. Some hit the magic shield, causing ripples before clattering harmlessly to the ground with a series of ding-ding sounds. Other metal shards embedded themselves into the rocky floor, creating small craters upon impact. Such destructive power, without the protective magic shield, Matthew would have surely been bleeding. Tusk, having a doppelganger is really handy, no need to risk my own skin anymore. With a wave of his hand, Matthew cast Mending and Cleaning. The shattered longsword remnants were cleaned up and the workbench and floor were restored. As for the broken scraps, they wouldn't be sent back for remelting, but rather fed to the kobolds with their voracious appetites to dispose of the evidence. In maintaining secrecy and concealing his power, Matthew remained as cautious as ever. Failing at crafting didn't dampen Matthew's spirits. Instead, it provided valuable lessons, helping him avoid the same mistakes in future attempts. With the help of his system's display and his accumulated experience, Matthew was making rapid progress in magic item crafting. The frequency of failures steadily decreased, and once Matthew made a mistake, he rarely repeated it. Fully focused, Matthew reaped substantial rewards for his efforts. In just one afternoon, he successfully crafted 30 enchanted weapons and pieces of equipment. Though he still experienced 20 failures, he raised his magic item crafting level to 122. Moreover, Matthew had now completely mastered the process of enchanting with Tier 1 spells. Too bad Mountain's skill level isn't high enough, otherwise I could have him handle the crafting of enchanted items. In just one afternoon, with a 60% success rate, Matthew consumed 250 gold coins worth of materials. However, the 30 successful enchanted items could easily be sold for 5,000 gold coins, netting him a profit of 3,750 gold coins. An astonishing number. At present, Bay Village held 800 troll captives, with 200 trolls voluntarily donating blood each day. Mountain's production of blood-replenishing potions had exceeded 7,000 bottles, and after setting aside some for storage and personal use, the pure profit was around 3,000 gold coins. While the profit margin for crafting enchanted items was lower, the overall profit was much higher. Moreover, unlike the relatively cheap blood-replenishing potions, enchanted items, although not affordable for every adventurer, always sold well. If Mountain's magic item crafting skill increased, he could mass-produce enchanted equipment, just like he did with the potions. Mountain's daily output alone could bring in tens of thousands of gold coins for Bay Village. Matthew swallowed hard, shaking off this unrealistic thought for now. Based on Mountain's current growth rate, it would take him at least 2 more years to reach advanced-level magic item crafting. There's still a long way to go. Matthew decided to stop crafting enchanted items for now, as it no longer contributed to his magic item crafting skill. After leaving the lab, Matthew had dinner. With some time left in the day, he checked in on Liana and the other children with potential for spellcasting. Those who worked hard were rewarded. Those who slacked off and neglected their studies had their parents informed by Ralph, ensuring they would receive some loving discipline that evening. Matthew then spent some time checking on Yaya, who was fast asleep. She was in a stage of rapid growth, and all she needed was energy, supplies, nutrition, and sleep. Matthew made good use of the remaining time by heading to the underground training room, where he practiced various spells on training dummies. He trained until all his mana was depleted. Afterward, he studied several spell scrolls he had not yet learned, memorizing the critical spell models. Before bed, Matthew would meditate for about 2 hours, constructing the new spell models. Finally, after a busy day, Matthew cast several alert spells outside his bedroom and went to sleep. He had no time to waste. 5 days later, bright sunlight streamed through the layered clouds, illuminating the open fields. Crystal-clear river water flowed into the tens of thousands of acres of reclaimed land. Farmers excitedly watched as the water coursed through the crisscrossing channels, their eyes full of delight. From afar, Ralph turned his gaze from the approaching caravan and looked at the neatly lined-up farmers. In a loud but gentle voice, he said, "Remember, you are not only working for the Lord but also for the territory and for yourselves. The more land we reclaim, the more you will receive. The better the land is cultivated, the greater your harvest will be." With just a few words, Ralph had stirred the farmers' enthusiasm. Under the direction of their teams, they herded oxen, held their tools, and worked methodically. Meanwhile, in the distance, the soldiers, seeing the transformation of the fields, curiously discussed it among themselves. Are they planning to grow rice? Why not wheat? I know this. My dad said rice can be harvested twice a year, but wheat only once. Wow, rice can be harvested twice a year. Really? How do you not know this? They are from the West. We in the East eat more rice, but other places don't. Why not? Rice is pretty tasty. This goes back over 1,000 years. This area used to belong to an empire in the East, but for some reason they withdrew. Hearing this, Matthew paused from reviewing the Troll Valley map, his thoughts wandering. He knew that the Eastern Empire, thousands of years ago, hadn't completely withdrawn, leaving some of its people behind to thrive here. However, a few hundred years ago, this region and its people were fully absorbed into the Netheral Empire. Matthew felt a pang of regret. Whether in the game or now, he'd never had the chance to explore the mysterious Eastern Empire and see its different landscapes. But Matthew quickly shook off the thought, focusing on the skull-marked danger zones on the map, his mind racing. The area where the magical plant konjac grows is also inhabited by a group of ogres. Announcement: a big thank you to Rael Bataclan for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 107, The Magic Plant Konjac. Chapter 107, The Magic Plant Konjac, a low-level magical plant. It has an oval shape, dark black surface, and brown wrinkled texture, with its roots spreading in sheet-like formations. Konjac has many uses. It can be eaten raw to detoxify, and is also used in potion making. Many basic potions, such as mana recovery potions, basic healing potions, and stamina potions, require konjac. Its market value is quite high, but it is difficult to harvest. Konjac is favored by some magical creatures. The areas where it grows are always inhabited by numerous magical creatures, making harvesting quite challenging. This time, the difficulty had reached its peak. Ogres are not creatures to be trifled with. They are lazy yet violent, found in nearly every region of the Western continent. Ogres are enormous, averaging 3 meters in height and weighing over 300 kilograms with ease. In terms of size and strength, they far surpass trolls. Every adult ogre possesses more than 20 points in extraordinary strength, and some ogre warriors also have berserking abilities, making their melee combat power extremely formidable. The average challenge level of an ogre is a solid 9+. Encountering an ogre in the wild is far more dangerous than encountering a troll. Though trolls have excellent regeneration abilities, their melee power doesn't match the crushing force of an ogre's charge. Ogres have a broad diet and often live near their prey's habitats as omnivorous creatures. They frequently feast on intelligent beings, particularly enjoying elves, dwarves, and halflings. The most important factor is that ogres not only have strong individual combat abilities, but they are also communal creatures. The ogre tribe occupying the Konjac growing area was a rare large tribe. An experienced roguish adventurer, intent on claiming the full bounty, used special techniques to hide for 3 days, thoroughly scouting the numbers. 60 adult male ogres, 40 adult female ogres, 20 ogre cubs, and 1 ogre chieftain. While female ogres typically don't participate in combat, they still possess formidable fighting strength and will intervene if necessary. On paper, this lineup is more dangerous than 200 troll soldiers. It wasn't that 60 male ogres had more fighting power than 200 troll soldiers. It was simply because ogres are far more terrifying in the art of bullying the weak. Junior shield-bearer soldiers can barely withstand troll attacks with the help of magical scrolls and auras. But when faced with an adult ogre, they might be killed with a single blow. If all the soldiers were brought into formation to battle the ogres, a single misstep could result in catastrophic losses. And to top it off, Matthew had only brought 15 people with him this time. However, Matthew's face was full of smiles, carrying the anticipation of leading his group into a high-difficulty dungeon. While Matthew was contemplating what strategy to use against the ogre tribe, the convoy quickly made its way into the dark forest. Before long, the convoy arrived at the lumber camp. The lumber camp had undergone significant changes since just a few days ago. The outer walls made of large stone bricks now stood 7 meters high, giving a strong sense of security and sturdiness. The tireless kobolds were largely to thank for this. Working in shifts day and night, they steadily brought about tremendous progress. The wide moat was now almost complete, its clear water revealing the bottom, and occasionally a few fish darted about. From the top of the tall watchtower, concealed eyes surveyed the area below, confirming that all was well with the perimeter checkpoints before retreating back into the shadows. The soldiers patrolling the walls in neat formations occasionally cast envious glances toward the convoy. Beyond the workers, the adventurers were already up early, and the adventurer hall was bustling. Did you hear? Alice's group got a special commission from the Lord, and they've recruited 30 people in just the past few days. Of course, I heard. I've also heard some insider info. Their mission's bounty is a full 500 gold coins. Ha! 500 gold? That's nothing. In the past few days alone, they've captured over 20 trolls from the valley. That's over 1,000 gold coins right there. You don't know shit. Sure, 500 gold coins isn't much, but if they complete the mission, each one of them gets an enchanted piece of equipment. That's the real reward. Enchanted equipment. For real? That means each person gets at least 100 gold coins worth, right? 100 gold coins. Don't kid yourself. These aren't your average enchanted items. They're way better than the ones you can buy in other cities. You mean the kind you can only buy if you have over 100 contribution points and 100 gold coins. Exactly. You saw Alice's enchanted longbow, right? It shot through a troll's knee from 200 meters away. Whoa, they've hit the jackpot. Why don't we have that kind of luck? Luck. Heh, the last time we fought trolls, only Alice's group stood up to them. That's not luck. The adventurers spoke openly, without bothering to lower their voices. Hearing this, the members of Alice's adventurer party couldn't help but smile brightly. Chris, in particular, was full of anticipation as he looked at Alice, muttering to himself, "Thank goodness I listened to Alice's advice, otherwise how could we have earned the Lord's favor?" The new recruits also felt a sense of relief. However, while her team was filled with joy and excitement, Alice, as the captain, wasn't quite as optimistic. After a few days of exploration, Alice had come to understand the dangers of Troll Valley much more clearly. Though she had recruited more people, keeping them all alive and unscathed wouldn't be an easy task. Moreover, Alice still had concerns about the mission from the Lord. Is it really as simple as just finding Konjac? As Alice pondered, she suddenly noticed the surroundings had fallen silent. She looked up and saw the approaching carriage. At the front of the carriage was the towering figure of Beelzebub, someone every adventurer now recognized. During the troll battle, Beelzebub had single-handedly held down half the defensive line, a feat that left a strong impression on everyone. Next to Beelzebub were the familiar faces of Leon and Old Village Chief Field. The other soldiers were all tall, well-built, and exuded a fierce aura. What made the adventurers most envious was that every soldier wore gleaming, sturdy armor, with magical auras flickering upon them. Each one had enchanted armor. Seeing this, Alice felt a wave of relief. Bay Village had sent out its main force, so the Lord clearly wasn't using them as bait. Yet she still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Chapter 108, The Lord Shows Off. Chapter 108, The Lord Shows Off. The interior of Troll Valley was unexpectedly vast. In the center of the valley flowed a gentle stream. On both sides of the riverbanks grew lush green meadows, dotted with dense patches of reeds. Sparse groves and thickets occasionally dotted the landscape, giving the area a peaceful, idyllic feel under the bright sunlight. Field gazed at the valley with mixed emotions, envisioning a future where this flat land had been cultivated and transformed into fields of wheat and rice. A castle for the Lord in the center, surrounded by a dozen small villages, with a stronghold at the valley's entrance. The Old Village Chief's dreams were grand, but thinking of the dangerous creatures they had encountered along the way, he couldn't help but frown. Crunch! A yellowed tusk bit deeply into a bone, sucking out the marrow with a loud, slurping sound. The thick smell of blood ignited a deep rage in the troll's heart, its bloodshot eyes filled with hatred as it let out a low growl. It warily watched the mountain ravine ahead, crouching slightly as its legs tensed. Even though its wounds had healed, the troll could still feel a dull ache in its bones, the terrifying memory of its leg being shattered by a brutal strike deeply etched in its mind. Grinding the bone into fragments between its teeth, the troll was about to enjoy the rest of its wild boar feast when a shadow suddenly fell across its face with a dull thud. At first, the troll paid it no mind, but intense pain soon radiated from its face. Instinctively, it reached out to grab at the twisted, slimy sensation, and an indescribable terror welled up inside it. A wave of agony swept over the troll, and faintly, it heard the sharp whistle of something cutting through the air. Squelch! The last sound the troll heard was the crack of its skull shattering. Dang! You have killed a troll. You gained 50 experience points and 1 skill point. Lowering his staff, Matthew ignored the curious looks from the adventurers and said in a clear voice, "Move forward. He wasn't here to capture trolls. That wasn't necessary. Earning money was only a means to an end. Completing tasks and increasing his power were the real goals." Alice glanced at him reflexively, nodded as if it were the most natural thing, and gestured for the group to continue moving forward. Up ahead, Beelzebub looked nervously at the fallen troll's corpse. The remnants of the corrosive acid from Matthew's acid arrow continued to eat away at the troll's skull, exposing the white bone underneath. Though confident he could take down a troll quickly, Beelzebub had no certainty he could withstand one of Matthew's rapid magical attacks. Passing adventurers saw the troll's gruesome fate, recalling the awe and mystery surrounding spellcasters. Additionally, they had learned that this mysterious spellcaster was the leader of the group, and that they were required to follow his orders. Some felt regret, but no one dared to voice their thoughts aloud. After demonstrating his power, Matthew took a moment to observe the others in the group, and found little complaint. Everyone displayed a commendable level of professionalism. Matthew had invited the adventurers along for this mission to evaluate their growth speed. If their progress wasn't fast enough, he'd have to figure out a way to help them improve. Of course, Matthew wasn't planning to abandon them. He simply wanted to accelerate their development. It might come at a cost to them, but overall it would be beneficial. Alice's party of adventurers was already quite strong. Their average level had reached 5. There were 8 mid-tier professionals in the group, and Alice herself was a level 9 ranger. Based on his data, Matthew knew she wasn't far from stepping into the higher tiers. Perhaps I can find a way to recruit her. As Matthew pondered, several sharp bird calls rang out from the distance. The group halted their advance, waiting for the scouts to report back. Alice quickly approached, not bothering to peer under Matthew's hood, and quietly reported her findings. "We've spotted 3 ogres ahead. We're nearing our destination." Rubbing his staff, Matthew glanced at his remaining 230 mana points and issued a quiet command. "Surround them and prepare to eliminate them." Alice glanced at Matthew in surprise but didn't question him. However, she found it odd. Bay Village's usual approach was cautious. When developing the Dark Forest, Bay Village had not rushed forward, but instead only harvested some resources. In skirmishes, Old Village Chieffield led by example, avoiding direct confrontations as much as possible, preferring safer methods like ranged attacks and traps. But everything seemed to change when Bay Village spellcasters joined the fight. Many adventurers still found the large-scale battle against the trolls hard to believe when they recalled it. And now, this mysterious spellcaster seemed to be no different. Could it be that they're especially confident in their combat abilities? Or do they already know everything about the enemy and have prepared countermeasures? These thoughts briefly flashed through Alice's mind before she began directing the group's formation. The scouts surrounded the battlefield as usual, preventing new enemies from sneaking in and causing unforeseen incidents. The rangers formed the second layer of defense, ready to assist if the melee fighters struggled. In case of any unexpected intrusions, they would act as the primary delay force. The remaining 20 or so melee professionals closed in on the ogres. The battle-hardened adult ogres sensed something amiss and let out angry roars, asserting their strength and territory. Unfortunately, they had chosen the wrong opponents this time. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than a dozen crossbow bolts shot toward the ogres, who had no experience dealing with such attacks. One ogre was immediately struck in the chest by 3 bolts, collapsing with a pained howl. As it fell, a glowing magic missile streaked through the air, striking it square in the head. Splat! The ogre's head exploded in an instant. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The remaining 2 ogres screamed in agony. Despite their severe injuries, their battle-hardened spirits remained unbroken. Rather than flee, they charged toward the source of the crossbow fire. Matthew, who had just gained another wave of experience points, did not rush to attack. He signaled the soldiers to cease their crossbow fire and instructed Beelzebub to lead the charge. Matthew wanted to gauge the ogre's melee capabilities, gather detailed information, and develop better strategies for the upcoming fights. Beelzebub engaged one of the ogres, swinging his massive axe to meet the ogre's thick wooden club head-on. Bang! Beelzebub was forced back 2 steps, his feet digging deep grooves into the ground, while the ogre stumbled and fell, its club chopped in half. Though they both possessed extraordinary strength, Beelzebub's superior technique made him the stronger fighter. Chapter 109. The Lazy and Brutal Ogres. Chapter 109. The lazy and brutal ogres. Beelzebub suppressed one of the ogres, gaining the upper hand with his combination of strength and combat skill. Leon led a group of melee fighters, using flexible hit-and-run tactics to surround another ogre. The adventurers who hadn't yet joined the fray watched the soldiers' smooth teamwork with astonishment. Even mid-tier professionals typically avoided close combat with creatures like ogres. The overwhelming strength that came with extraordinary power was a nightmare for most melee fighters. Beelzebub was one thing, the adventurers were already familiar with his prowess. But for a group of level 3 and 4 fighters led by Leon to hold their own against an ogre was shocking. A few keen-eyed adventurers observed closely. Soon they realized what was going on. Not only did Leon's group display impressive offensive coordination, keeping the ogre off balance, but their defensive tactics were also exceptionally refined. They rarely engaged the ogre head-on, avoiding the brute force of its attacks whenever possible. When one soldier couldn't avoid an attack, they didn't recklessly block it. Instead, they would fall back quickly, sometimes rolling out of the way without regard for their appearance. Meanwhile, other soldiers would close in from different angles, attacking the ogre in vulnerable spots, forcing it to abandon its pursuit. Strange, last time I saw them fight, they weren't this strong. That defensive experience is on par with some mid-tier professionals. It's totally different. Mid-tier professionals rely on ability, these soldiers rely on experience. Does Bay Village really have some kind of secret training method? Don't you know Arnold, the old drill master? He's a legend in Blood Moon City. I've trained under him myself. I get it now. Bay Village's lord is just willing to spend big. They are treating every soldier like a professional, pouring so many resources into them. Of course, their progress is going to be fast. That's not the point. Look at their equipment. Both their weapons and armor are enchanted. The lord is really going all out. Kinda makes me want to join. Don't get your hopes up. The lord wouldn't be interested in you. Screw you. Alice overheard her team's chatter, and a subtle realization stirred in her mind. With her sharp intellect, she had noticed something interesting. Even if other professionals underwent the same training, their progress wouldn't be as fast as these soldiers. Alice wasn't sure if the others had picked up on this, but she decided to keep it to herself. Gradually, the two ogres' wounds multiplied, and they began to weaken. Beyond the adventurous theories about strength improvements, the real reason the soldiers could now easily surround and defeat a wounded ogre was simple. Every day, they trained against weakened trolls. Over time, they had gained extensive experience fighting large humanoid creatures. This had created a scene that left the adventurers astonished. Meanwhile, Matthew had been observing the battle, collecting detailed data. Name, ogre type, subgiant, plus 20 max health, plus 2 strength height, 2, 85 meters weight, 250 kilograms challenge level, 9 plus class, level 7 warrior talents, advanced toughness plus 2 constitution plus 5 strength feats, intermediate feat crushing blow, deals 20% additional strength-based damage. Heritage, none skills, cleave LV2, charge LV2, tree throw LV2, vital spot protection LV1. Attributes, strength, 22 constitution, 16 dexterity, 9 intelligence, 7 charisma, 5 perception, 10 luck plus 1. Weapons, crude wooden club, hardwood club armor, hardened leather attack power, 7 defense power, 4 health points, 57 evaluation, lazy and brutal creatures. Ogres were formidable in melee combat, and the destructive power of their extraordinary strength was more dangerous than a troll's regenerative abilities. A head-on confrontation is too risky, we should use more indirect tactics. Having gathered the information he needed, Matthew didn't want to waste any more time. Conveniently, both ogres' health had already dropped below 10. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Arrows sliced through the air, and the massive, bloodied bodies of the ogres crashed to the ground. Without much magical resistance, the ogres couldn't withstand the sneak attack of magical missiles, becoming more experience points for Matthew. Although he didn't gain any skill points, Matthew didn't mind. He signaled the group to continue moving forward. Chris briefly handled the bodies while Alice, recalling Matthew's spellcasting movements, felt a strange sense of familiarity. Equally fast, equally lethal. Could this be a hallmark of the Sir family's arcane mastery? But I've never heard of anything like this before. I get it. This arcane master must be the Lord's mentor. In Alice's understanding, any arcane caster was a powerful and mysterious figure, at least a high-level professional. Otherwise, how could a few simple first circle spells kill a powerful ogre so effortlessly? Perhaps the Lord promised to build a wizard's tower for this arcane master in exchange for his help. Convinced her theory was correct, Alice relaxed completely and continued directing the adventurers forward with ease. In her mind, with an arcane master of at least high tier standing by, dealing with a small ogre camp would be a breeze. Matthew had no idea that Alice had jumped to such conclusions from a few small details. Even if he had known, he wouldn't have bothered to correct this delightful misunderstanding. In fact, he would have happily maintained the image of a mysterious and powerful figure. The group hadn't moved far when Matthew heard noises ahead, signaling yet another encounter with ogres. After conversing briefly with the scouts, Alice approached Matthew to report, her tone now carrying a hint of deference. We've spotted a patch of magic tubers ahead. And 24 female ogres. Matthew raised an eyebrow, immediately realizing that they had entered the heart of the ogres' territory. Their domain is this small. They have no sense of security. Well, it makes sense. Even high-tier magical creatures prefer not to mess with ogres in this region, so these lazy and brutal beings wouldn't be too vigilant. There are 24 female ogres here, taking up more than half of the ogre camp. If something happens to them, it'll definitely throw the entire ogre camp into chaos. In that case, a sinister plan quickly formed in Matthew's mind. The unsuspecting ogres were about to face the greatest surprise of their lives. Chapter 110. Delivered to the door. Chapter 110. Delivered to the door. Carefully peeling off the mud from the outer layer of the konjac, the female ogre's eyes were filled with greed as she sniffed the tempting aroma. Unexpectedly, she didn't eat the konjac she collected, but instead placed it in a rough and ugly wooden frame, merely licking her fingers that had touched the flavor. She then lowered her head and began to dig in the soil with her hands, trying to follow the roots to find the next konjac. The other ogres did the same, gathering the konjac they found piece by piece without privately eating them. This somewhat exceeded adventurers' understanding of ogres. Seeing this, Matthew blinked in surprise, realizing that the plan had become smoother. The only possibility for the gluttonous and lazy female ogres to be so restrained was that there were newly born ogre infants in the camp. Lazy and brutal, ogres were undoubtedly terrifying to the creatures around them. However, they were surprisingly good to their offspring. Not waiting any longer, Matthew took out a small length of white silk thread and quickly chanted a spell. Pointing his staff forward, he said, "Second-tier spell web, spellcasting beyond his level." Matthew was already a level 3 arcanist and needed to level up one more time to master second-tier spells. However, thanks to the characteristics of an arcanist and his extraordinary intelligence attribute, Matthew could perform spells above his tier. Of course, doing so consumed extra mana. The web falling from the sky covered the unprepared female ogres, immediately causing chaos. The web, as thick as fingers, tightly bound them. The more they struggled, the tighter it became. The female ogres howled incessantly, their sharp, high-pitched cries echoing far away. From a distant mountain stream, faint shouts echoed back, and hearing this commotion, the adventurers immediately grew tense. The female ogres had called for reinforcements. Matthew didn't continue attacking the trapped female ogres because something interesting happened. When the female ogres realized they couldn't escape, they actually began lying down on the spot. They gave up. That's right, although the female ogres had strong, intimidating bodies, as long as there was no immediate threat to their lives, their desire to fight wasn't strong. They usually waited quietly for the male ogres to come to their rescue. Knowing this, Matthew didn't continue his attack. Looking at the somewhat stunned soldiers and adventurers, he calmly said, "The male ogres will arrive soon, prepare for battle. Their spell resistance isn't strong. Hold them off as long as possible, leave the rest to me." Hearing this, everyone detected an unparalleled confidence in Matthew's tone. Old Village Chieffield took out a bottle of dark green potion and poured it into a small black bucket, then added water to it. After fully stirring it, he signaled to the nearby rangers and rogues, "Apply it to the arrowheads, it's quite effective. Just be careful not to hurt yourselves." Some experienced mid-tier rogues sniffed it lightly, and a faint numbness hit their lungs, their eyes lighting up as they exclaimed, "Paralysis potion." Meeting the adventurers' surprised gazes, Old Village Chieffield nodded indifferently, signaling for other soldiers to bring out the crossbow bolts. The soldiers acted quickly, dipping the bundled crossbow bolts into the mixture and soaking them for a few seconds with practiced ease. The soldiers lined up to dip the arrows, and the adventurers subconsciously lined up as well. Having become accustomed to queuing in Bay Ridge, the adventurers also started to discuss it. Is it the paralysis potion that costs 30 gold coins per bottle? That's right. Although its effect only lasts for an hour, it's extremely potent, even effective against high-tier professionals. 30 gold coins per bottle. That expensive. A bottle of paralysis potion is nothing. Look at the crossbows they're using. It looks like a military-grade crossbow, each one costing 20 gold coins, and the crossbow bolts are top-notch too. Each one is at least 10 silver coins. I'm envious. Without a comparison, there's no sense of loss. Seeing the lavish equipment of the Bay Ridge soldiers, the adventurers couldn't help but murmur to themselves. Why would the Lord of Bay Ridge be willing to spend so much money on regular soldiers? Filled with doubts and a slight sense of grievance, the adventurers finished dipping their arrows and dispersed to hide under the commands of Alice and Field. Over 10 huge male ogres were already charging in with loud howls. They shouted as they ran, trying to locate the exact position of the female ogres. The lying female ogres called back excitedly. Just as Alice was about to draw her weapon against them, Matthew softly said, "Don't worry, I'm more concerned they might not make it." While Alice was stunned, the male ogres from the distance had already located the sound and arrived. A dense barrage of arrows rained down on the ogres. They were hit by several arrows, but their thick skin and tough bodies showed no reaction as they continued to charge forward. Ding, the ogre is affected by paralysis poison. Poison will take effect in 7 seconds. Ding, the ogre resisted the paralysis poison. Ding, the ogre is affected by paralysis poison. Poison will take effect in 9 seconds. Ding, the ogre resisted. The ogres had strong bodies, and some with higher constitution attributes were even able to resist the paralysis poison once or twice. The barrage of arrows kept coming, and after 3 to 4 rounds of volleys, each ogre had 7 or 8 arrows sticking out of them. They could resist once or twice, but couldn't withstand everything. As Matthew saw these male ogres rushing toward him, the paralysis poison had already begun to take effect. Their limbs twitched, their movements became erratic, and many of the male ogres were losing control of their balance. Sensing danger, the male ogres tried to swing their thick wooden clubs to block the incoming arrows. But their movements were too clumsy, only able to protect the vital points on their heads. A few male ogres even tried to throw javelins. But their opponents were quite cunning, always hiding behind tree trunks. The giant javelins flew through the air with a loud whoosh, but failed to hit any targets. Soon, the male ogres were covered in blood, and their condition quickly deteriorated. The paralysis poison's effect on them was becoming increasingly severe, making the short distance of a few dozen meters seem like an insurmountable gap. Matthew could see that although these ogres still had plenty of health left, their bodies were starting to succumb to the burden. Their overall movements had slowed down by 30%, and their threat level had dropped by nearly half. "Don't get too close, keep shooting from a distance," Having grown accustomed to fighting trolls, the big guys had shed their initial nervousness, finding it hard to feel any awe toward the pathetic ogres in front of them. After much effort, when the ogres finally rushed over, Matthew cast grease on the ground, causing the ogres to stumble and fall all over the place. While they're down, finish them off. Announcement: a big thank you to Melbourne Estalor for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 111. The Petrified Ogres. Chapter 111. The Petrified Ogres. There was no need to hesitate. Matthew stared at the ogres and tore open the fireball scroll inside his robe. The spinning fireball boomed down, instantly enveloping the ogres, who had been under continuous attack, in flames. The fierce impact of the fireball, combined with the intense burning of the wall of fire, instantly turned 7 or 8 ogres into charred corpses. The other few, with their bodies ablaze, screamed and ran wildly, rolling on the ground in agony, yet they survived due to their tenacious vitality. Listening to the pleasant sound of the kill notifications, Matthew looked at the remaining 8 or 9 surviving ogres. He gestured for everyone to rush in, silently muttering in his heart, "As long as you're willing to spend money, with an organized and planned way of fighting, you can almost always win." As long as they weren't outnumbered, Matthew, with his vast combat experience, wasn't at all worried about these disorganized ogres. More than 10 male ogres didn't even have time to launch a decent attack or resist before they were slaughtered by the soldiers, who were high on morale. Matthew left these ogres for the soldiers to practice on, aiming to boost their confidence. "See, these big, brutal ogres just look fierce. Hurry and pull out the arrows, at least they can still be used 3 more times. The crossbow bolts didn't even fully penetrate, their bodies are too tough. They are just like us, 2 shoulders and 1 head, kill them and they'll die. Phew, these ogres are so poor, they don't even have decent weapons or armor. If the ogres had those weapons, they wouldn't have been killed so easily. It would be us in trouble then. Heh heh, lucky for us the Arcane Master stepped in. Otherwise, if those ogres rushed over, I wouldn't know how to deal with them. Idiot, they're so slow, we would just keep wearing them down. Quit talking, hurry and drag the corpses over, toss them into the fire ahead and be done with it. Can we burn it all? What kind of joke is that? Such a big chunk of meat, how could it all burn? This is just to show the other ogres that we're not to be messed with." While the others were cleaning up the battlefield, Matthew returned to the carriage, sat cross-legged and quietly picked up a water bottle, sneaking a sip of mana potion. From entering the Troll Valley until now, he had gained 4 precious skill points, and his experience points had soared to 70,000. Matthew planned to save the level-up mana restoration for a crucial moment. The stench of burning flesh spread, and the crackling fire sounds made the more than 20 tied-up female ogres extremely terrified. They stared in horror at the gradually blackened corpses, their minds blank. They couldn't believe it, those normally invincible, tough-skinned, thick-fleshed male ogres. At this moment, before the humans, they were so vulnerable. The female ogres looked at each other, too scared to make a sound. "So quiet. That's not good," Matthew waved to Alice and whispered something in her ear. Alice walked over, glaring fiercely at the female ogres, and shouted loudly in the common language, "Keep shouting." The female ogres looked bewildered. Their not-so-bright minds couldn't comprehend Alice's demand. Without hesitation, Alice picked up her crossbow and shot an arrow in front of the female ogres. Seeing the arrow quiver slightly, they started screaming again in fear. At first, the adventurers were puzzled, not understanding why the captain was doing this. Until another group of male ogres charged in, howling. They crashed straight into the ambush again. After enduring a barrage of paralyzing arrows and another round of bombardment from Matthew, the severely wounded male ogres, only 7 or 8 of them alive, managed to charge up to them. Once they realized what was happening, they finally delivered the killing blows. The second group of male ogres fell. They posed no real threat at all, it seemed too natural. Everyone felt quite puzzled. While finishing them off, hacking off the ogres' heads took considerable effort, proving these bodies were real. But why did the ogres run so willingly to their deaths? Could it be that this was all part of the Arcane Master's plan? Seeing another group of male ogres fall, the surviving female ogres, more desperate than ever, screamed even louder. The bizarre scene made everyone look at Matthew with changed gazes. That sense of mystery and power was unconsciously magnified by their own minds. Self-imagination, self-strategy, most dangerous of all. Naturally, Matthew didn't explain the principles of knowledge, tactics, or understanding the enemy. He calmly looked toward the ravine in the distance and issued an order: "Keep moving forward." His plain voice seemed to carry an undeniable authority and some mysterious force, causing everyone to instinctively obey. The bound female ogres screamed as they were marched toward the ogre camp. They didn't dare make any sudden moves, not even daring to run faster. As the ogre camp loomed closer in the distance, the soldiers gradually became more tense. To their surprise, there were no burly male ogres standing guard outside the camp. Instead, the place was in chaos. At the entrance of the camp, A group of indistinguishable male and female ogres were constantly fighting over things, even breaking into violent brawls. Only a few chubby ogre cubs stood by, confusedly watching the chaotic adult ogres. Their big black and white eyes showed no anxiety, only a hint of curiosity. The approaching screams made the ogres even more frightened. Some of the male ogres gave up what they were fighting over and fled pitifully toward the back of the camp. Others picked up weapons again, standing menacingly at the chaotic entrance of the camp. However, their trembling legs showed that their hearts weren't as strong as they appeared. The soldiers and adventurers exchanged bewildered glances. They had prepared for a tough battle, only to be met with this scene. The fleeing ogres were male, while those huddled together in the camp were female. Even though they were the same species, their behavior was completely different. Taking advantage of their scattered strength, Matthew pointed at the fleeing ogres and softly said to Alice, "Shoot at them from a distance, drive them toward the troll camp a few kilometers away. If the troll camp was still strong, they would surely be eager to capture or even hire these male ogres. If the two joined forces, they'd be even more troublesome." But since the troll camp had recently suffered heavy losses and was being harassed by adventurers deep in the Troll Valley, they would certainly be on edge and sensitive. When they clashed, a battle was inevitable. Announcement: a big thank you to Cake Boss for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 112, +5, Ogre Blue Fatty. Chapter 112, +5, Ogre Blue Fatty. Gurgle. The hunger in his stomach kept protesting. Unlike other ogres with grey-brown skin, Yagron was entirely light blue. He was holding his round belly with his small, stubby hands, and his large, clear black and white eyes reflected the image of food not far away. It was a type of food Yagron had never seen before, bright white and transparent, exuding a hazy steam. The sweet aroma made Yagron constantly twitch his nose, and drool flowed freely from his mouth. The hunger made him unwilling to continue squatting there. He carefully moved his chubby body, sneaking around to avoid his aunt's watchful eyes. To avoid making any noise, Yagron even placed his hands on the ground and crawled slowly, step by step. His mind completely focused on the food, Yagron didn't notice the figure standing nearby as he cautiously moved his round body to the edge of the large pot. Huff huff, the sound of the porridge bubbling was so pleasing to Yagron's ears. Aside from the beautiful white rice grains, the light-colored chunks of meat emitted an even more enticing aroma. Occasionally, half a fish body would emerge, making the broth even thicker and more fragrant. He couldn't help but grin foolishly, his chubby hands reaching out toward the food. Whoosh! Suddenly, a bright red flame flared up, startling Yagron, who quickly pulled back his hand. The leaping flame looked fierce, leaving a deep impression on Yagron. The food was right in front of him, but Yagron couldn't eat it, which made him anxious, and he began to whimper. His voice awakened the motionless female ogres, who turned their heads in shock. Somehow, this little fatty had crawled out of the pen that imprisoned them, and ended up in front of a human campfire. The extremely protective female ogres stood up anxiously, but their shouts were stuck in their throats. Because the figure they feared the most was quietly standing behind Yagron. The greedy little fatty hadn't realized this, and continued anxiously circling the large pot, whimpering with his chubby mouth. At that moment, a large, light blue arm scooped up a big chunk of food with a large ladle, and placed it into a bright white metal bowl. The little fatty stared dumbfounded at this scene, his chubby mouth hanging open, and drool slowly dripped down, landing with a plop on the ground. "Do you want to eat?" The calm, low voice reached Yagron's ears. The little fatty nodded without thinking, but felt a bit strange, as he had no memory of being able to speak this way. But he didn't have the brainpower to think about that problem. His eyes followed the food bowl placed in front of him, just as he was about to excitedly pounce on it. A small stick struck his little hand. The pain made the little fatty immediately retract his hand, and his black and white eyes became watery. Even at that moment, Yagron didn't turn to look at the figure that made the sound. His eyes remained fixed on the food. A true, sincere little foodie. The fragrant and rich bowl of food was slowly moved forward. The little fatty seemed to be in a trance, eyes wide, following step by step. The food bowl was placed on a dining table, and Yagron climbed up, naturally plopping his round bottom onto a wooden stool. Matthew smiled, watching this focused little foodie, and placed a spoon in the bowl, using his mage hand to demonstrate feeding him a bite. One had to admit, foodies always have a special talent and ability to learn when it comes to eating. He immediately grabbed the spoon and clumsily shoved a big mouthful into his mouth. The food was still a bit hot, but the little fatty Yagron was reluctant to spit it out, blowing on it while holding it in his mouth. Matthew cast a cleanse spell on Yagron, patting his round head, his eyes filled with surprise. Name: Yagron. Age: 2 years 4 months. Race: Ogre Shaman. Species: Subgiant. Class: Not yet employed. Talent: Extraordinary talent. Flame bloodline not yet activated. Specialty, none. Inheritance, none. Attributes, strength, 7 constitution, 8 intelligence, 6 agility, 3 perception, 3 charisma, 4 luck, +5 evaluation, a little foodie with unlimited potential. There was no information about Yagron in Matthew's future memories, nor any data on an ogre shaman powerhouse. The situation was clear. This little fatty, deemed to have limitless potential, had never realized that potential. Perhaps in the future, he would quietly die in the Troll Valley, or somewhere along the way of his growth. But a +5 luck value meant this gluttonous, little fatty had the potential to grow into a high-tier legend. A little foodie worth cultivating. Gurgle, Yagron quickly finished most of the bowl of food, and in the end, lifted the bowl and dumped the remaining food into his wide-open mouth, making a delighted woof-woof sound. Where did this little fatty come from? Old John curiously glanced at Yagron. The little guy was already about 3 meters tall, yet he was still a baby ogre, not even 3 years old. However, that light blue skin puzzled old John. Could it be a mutated variety? Makes sense, the Arcane Master wouldn't take an interest in an ordinary ogre. After devouring a bowl of food, Yagron patted his round belly, still feeling a bit hungry. Being the kind of glutton willing to do anything for food, he slowly turned his head, gazing expectantly at Matthew. Hungry? More food? Hearing the vaguely familiar tone, Matthew couldn't help but think of his daughter. He waved off the soldiers who had gathered around and continued feeding the greedy Yagron. Poor little fatty, having never eaten anything other than breast milk and devil's root, was quickly absorbed in the meal, exclaiming in amazement. The soldiers clicked their tongues in wonder, while the adventurers began to chatter. What a smart little ogre, its intelligence must not be low. Is that really an ogre? Are there blue-skinned ogres in the world? You're just ignorant. I've been to the northern wilderness, where I've seen some blue-skinned ogres. Some of them can even cast spells, and they are incredibly powerful. Ha, stop bragging. Last time you said you'd been to the southern end of Falsico's Dragon Island. Haha, sure, the bragging was real, but the blue ogres are also real. I once served a powerful spellcaster and escorted a blue ogre specimen for him. It had 2 heads. Really, whether it's true or not, let's finish eating and keep watch. Our mission is complete. Ha ha, indeed. I didn't expect it to go this smoothly. Quit laughing. Make sure to keep an eye on those ogres. Amid the adventurers' discussions, the previously tense female ogres and other young ones also calmed down under Yagron's focused eating. They were soon given food, and without much hesitation, they quickly started eating and drinking. Free food, it was like a pie falling from the sky. Maybe being captured wasn't such a bad thing after all. Announcement: a big thank you to Ford Cliff for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 113. The ingenious use of illusion doppelganger. Chapter 113. The ingenious use of illusion doppelganger. No matter their size, every ogre is a big eater. Fortunately, they aren't picky. Even the rations the soldiers carried with them were eaten with great joy. Their faces showed expressions of happiness and smiles, and everyone could feel their genuine delight. However, the violent appearance of the ogres in battle still served as a reminder to everyone. No matter how gentle they are during a meal, one should never forget their ferocious side. What everyone found interesting was how the female ogres took meticulous care of their young. They gave the food to them first, and once the young were full, they gathered them in the safest middle, eating themselves only after. Then, the female ogres started fighting each other over food, astonishing everyone once again. Lazy yet violent creatures, a complex contradiction. Matthew naturally understood what was going on. The care for their young was engraved in the ogre's genes and instincts. The other 2 behaviors were more influenced by their intelligence, which averaged below 5 points. For a smart little fellow like Yagron to exist, it was unlikely that even 100,000 ogres would produce one like him. Yagron widened his eyes, curiously staring at Jiffen in front of him. The latter wore a faint smile on his face, holding a small dried fish that Yagron loved. Why did Yagron love it? Because he had just tasted it. Fish, Jiffen pointed to the dried fish in his hand, slowly pronouncing the word. Smacking his lips lightly, savoring the delicious sweetness of the dried fish, Yagron tried hard to open his mouth and utter the clumsy common language. FFF, fish, FFF, fish, fish. Under Yagron's delighted gaze, Jiffen happily handed him the dried fish. Watching him eat it in one bite and chew carefully, Jiffen then took out a piece of black bread from his backpack. He wasn't doing this for fun, but rather because it was a task assigned by the mysterious Arcane Master. Jiffen, ever meticulous, was determined to seize this opportunity. Not just for himself, but for his sister. Although the hope was slim, Jiffen absolutely would not give up easily. Investigate how large this devil's root patch is and arrange for people to patrol it. Especially keep an eye on the direction of the troll camp. If anything major happens, report to me immediately. Matthew instructed Alice with a few words before entering the tent they had set up, quickly sitting down cross-legged. He began to meditate. The method for restoring mana through illusion doppelgangers was almost the same as with the original body. In the absence of combat threats, meditation was the best way to restore mana. This is why the path of the Arcane Master was developed. Arcane Masters rely on methods of mana recovery, granting them far greater sustained combat ability than wizards and other spellcasters, no longer limited by the number of spell slots. What delighted Matthew was that the feeling of meditating with the illusion doppelganger was no different from that of the main body. While restoring mana, it also improved the experience of meditation skills. Thus, an absurd idea flashed through Matthew's mind. When I'm not using conscious projection, the illusion doppelganger can act on its own. So, if I give the illusion doppelganger a command to meditate before cancelling conscious projection, would it? The more he thought about it, the more plausible it seemed. Matthew decisively gave the illusion doppelganger the command to meditate, and then withdrew his conscious projection. Passing through a moment of darkness, Matthew felt his body again, and his consciousness returned to his original self. Just as he was about to check the status of the illusion doppelganger, the data display responded. Illusion doppelganger, status, meditating restoring 4 mana points per minute. Health 33/33 mana, 45/270. It actually worked. Matthew happily rubbed his hands together, immediately realizing the benefits of having the illusion doppelganger meditate to restore mana on its own. Double mana, training spellcasting in cycles, with proficiency growth naturally doubling as well. The illusion doppelganger in Troll Valley, while Matthew oversaw his territory. Dual operation, double the fun. By noon, the time had come. Matthew first had lunch, checked Lena's homework, cleared up some of her doubts, and assigned her new tasks. Just then, Steward Ralph arrived to report, and when Matthew mentioned the situation in Troll Valley, Ralph exclaimed with joy, "You took down an ogre camp and captured some ogre cubs as prisoners. That's fantastic. If possible, we could establish a logging camp-like outpost there and try to tame those ogres." Ralph's joy was understandable. The kobolds tamed by Yaya had played a huge role in the development of Bay Village. The stone roads were built by them, the irrigation ditches were dug by them, and even the sewer system was set up by them. The quality was quite good and the speed was fast. They saved Bay Village a lot of manpower, materials, and money. Moreover, under Matthew's direction, the kobolds had already begun digging a kobold mine. The kobolds were secretly transporting the ores they mined to the warehouse via underground tunnels. These ores had not yet been turned into weapons, but were being used to craft a wide variety of agricultural tools, which were in increasing demand. The kobolds were insignificant, yet incredibly important. The kobolds' only real weakness was their poor combat ability. Only a very few could become dragonborn. And now the Lord had captured ogres. Ogres were exceptionally powerful creatures, perfect for addressing the shortfall in Bay Territory's combat strength. How could Ralph not be excited? Matthew, however, wasn't as optimistic. He knew the flaws of the ogres all too well, and curing their laziness and volatility wouldn't be an easy task. However, compared to the chaotic and violent, moon-worshipping gnolls, ogres were indeed easier to deal with. They just needed a good instructor. Thinking about this, Matthew suddenly remembered something and asked, "How is Adam Smith doing?" Taking down the ogre camp only reduced the luck value from -3 to -2. The crisis was not entirely over. However, Matthew had already prepared and had a target in mind. With so many days having passed, he naturally wanted to know about Adam Smith's situation. Ralph frowned slightly, hesitating before answering. Adam Smith replied a couple of days ago. He had a conflict with some merchants, but no danger was encountered. The clay golem and soldiers played a significant role. However, Adam Smith suspects that the other side may not give up easily. He sent me a message. The supplies have been gathered. Should we take the risk of transporting them back, not give up? They will definitely launch an attack. A battle was inevitable. The fish has taken the bait. Various thoughts flashed through Matthew's mind, his dark eyes showing a glimmer of coldness. He smirked and said, "Notify Adam Smith to wait 5 days before leaving. We'll prepare properly and give them a nice surprise." Chapter 114, When I Have 100 Spell Scrolls. Chapter 114, When I Have 100 Spell Scrolls. 2 hours later, Matthew opened his eyes again. His consciousness had returned to Troll Valley. His mana was restored to 270 points. As soon as he stepped out of the tent, he saw a rather interesting scene. Jiffin, holding a bag, was surrounded by a group of bowing female ogres. The blue-skinned Yagran was also trailing behind him, leading a bunch of chubby ogre cubs. Jiffin pulled out a large salted fish, gently tapped it, and pointed to the big trees around the ogre camp, shouting in broken, "Giant tree, Fish, the female ogres stared blankly at him, their eyes fixed on the salted fish in his hand. If it weren't for Beelzebub, an old village chief field standing nearby, exuding a strong sense of deterrence, the ogres would have probably tried to snatch it by force. Is that all? Matthew blinked lightly but didn't say a word, silently observing the scene. Unexpectedly, Jiffin chuckled, lowered his head, and said to the drooling Yagron, "Chop tree." Trade for fish. Yagron's eyes widened immediately. Although he had just eaten a full meal 2 hours ago, he was already feeling hungry again. He eagerly nodded and waddled his round body towards the trees at the camp's edge. The ogre cubs eagerly followed behind him. Seeing that the ogre cubs had started moving, Jiffin signaled to Tom. Tom grabbed a bunch of newly made wooden axes and tossed them to the ogre cubs. He glanced out of the corner of his eye at the clustered female ogres, ensuring they showed no signs of aggression, and then demonstrated chopping at the tree trunk. Yagron, clearly more intelligent, grabbed a wooden axe and began chopping with a thunk-thunk sound. The nearby ogre cubs, though a bit slow, quickly followed suit, imitating his actions. Jiffin loudly cheered them on, rewarding the most diligent cubs with small dried fish while waving the large salted fish in his hand. Chop tree. Trade for fish. Encouraged by the rewards, the ogre cubs chopped even harder, shouting along with Yagron. Chop tree. Trade for fish. Seeing no danger and unable to resist the smell of food, the female ogres hesitated for a while before coming over. Watching their intimidating bodies, Tom instinctively swallowed nervously, but he held his ground and continued repeating, "Chop tree. Trade for fish. Chop tree." Trade for fish. Compared to the round, fierce-looking, horned and tusked male ogres, the female ogres resembled enlarged versions of human women. Their skin was slightly darker, and they lacked the fearsome protruding fangs, though faint muscle lines were visible. Their curvaceous forms made Tom feel even more pressured. Hearing their somewhat rough inquiries, Tom quickly nodded and swallowed again, saying, "Chop tree. Trade for fish." While speaking, Tom opened the nearby wooden box, revealing sharp axes inside, and mimed chopping at the trees. The female ogres exchanged glances, sensing the dozens of eyes watching them from all around. They grabbed the brand new axes and obediently started chopping at the trees. Fighting was the male ogre's role. All they wanted was to fill their bellies. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Axes swung, sending wood chips flying. Few female ogres become professionals, and their combat skills and experience were limited. However, their astonishing strength talent still allowed them to possess more than 20 points in extraordinary strength attributes as adults. In just a few short breaths, a massive tree, requiring 2 people to wrap their arms around, was chopped down swiftly and cleanly. The large tree crashed down with a boom, sending dust and leaves flying. The female ogres immediately stopped their actions, all turning their heads, eagerly looking at Tom. Tom felt his legs weaken, and before he could react, Jiffin had already placed the salted fish in the wooden box. Before the female ogres could pounce, Jiffin pulled out another bag of salted fish, swiftly opened it, and continued, "Chop tree. Trade for fish." The female ogres glanced at each other, grumbled among themselves, and then started chopping the surrounding trees again. Before long, trees continued to fall one after another, and the wooden box gradually filled with salted fish. The soldiers and adventurers exchanged bewildered glances, and when they turned to look secretly, they saw several bags full of salted fish. It seemed the ogres had plenty to eat now. Alice strode over, blinking in disbelief, and when she spotted Matthew approaching, she quickly said, "Trolls are coming, a large group of them." Matthew turned his head and motioned for Alice to lead the way, while discreetly notifying Old Village Chief Field and Beelzebub. Standing on the hilltop, 200 to 300 trolls emerged from the distant thicket. Troll soldiers. Troll warriors. This must be the last of the troll tribe's elite forces. Matthew climbed to the high ground, raised his staff high, and pointed it toward the distant trolls. Everyone turned their eyes toward him. Soldiers, adventurers, ogres, trolls. All eyes were focused on Matthew, filled with indescribable disbelief. Beelzebub's mouth opened slightly, witnessing a scene he would never forget for the rest of his life. A spinning fireball shot out from the tip of the raised staff. With a boom, the expanding firelight exploded in the midst of the trolls. The power was immense. It filled everyone with awe. The trolls, 200 meters away, were caught off guard. More than 10 charging trolls were struck, and 6 or 7 died instantly. They never expected the fireball spell to reach so far, so fast. But before the trolls could react, a second fireball was already whistling toward them. Boom, followed by a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one. The continuous explosions echoed through the ravine. Each burst of firelight represented death, sending shivers down everyone's spines. The rumbling ground shook everyone to their core. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of trolls were engulfed in the smoky explosions. The shrill screams, even from hundreds of meters away, could be heard clearly. The intense sensation shot straight through everyone's mind. Just as everyone thought the relentless fireballs would continue until every troll was wiped out, the whistling sound of fireballs abruptly stopped. The figure at the highest point had a dark short spear lodged in his chest. Everyone's hearts tightened, then they saw the black spear fly out, and the figure in the black robe vanished without a trace. Another unscathed figure stepped forward, raised the staff high, and under the watchful eyes of all, cast another fireball spell. Boom! Chapter 115 made a killing. Chapter 115 made a killing. The explosive rumbling settled into silence. The smoke and dust filling the sky were gently blown away by the breeze. The hiss of burning flames was extinguished by the light rain, which sizzled as it fell. Charred troll corpses littered the entire thicket. The terrifying power of the fireball spell left each body nearly impossible to piece back together. Many trolls weren't dead yet, but they had been mercilessly abandoned, left to writhe in pain on the ground. Paralyzing arrows continuously flew from the shadows, striking their chests with precision. The trolls, scared out of their wits, merely lay on the ground howling, too frightened to even fight back. Several rangers darted out, tying up the paralyzed trolls one by one. At first they were cautious, fearing that uninjured trolls might be lying in ambush. But soon they realized that the trolls, still capable of walking, had already fled. The remaining trolls, temporarily crippled, only let out pitiful howls when they saw the rangers, twisting their bodies in a desperate attempt to get away. The rangers, feeling both excited and conflicted, knew the truth. The trolls weren't afraid of them, they feared the mysterious and powerful arcane master. The endless fireball spells. This far exceeded their understanding, inspiring awe and terror. The adventurers spread out, avoiding the blast zone of the fireballs, ambushing the wounded and fleeing trolls. Even the smallest gains were still worth it. After all, each of these terrified trolls represented 50 gold coins. They were essentially walking treasure chests. However, the revered and admired arcane master wasn't having it as easy as they imagined. In order to unleash as much firepower as quickly as possible, Matthew didn't hesitate to enhance his abilities. Ding, you consumed 5 skill points to upgrade the advanced specialty, quick casting to LV3. Casting speed increased by 150%. Ding, you consumed 270 mana points and used 9 fireball spell scrolls. Ding, you killed 51 trolls, earning 2 700 experience points and 4 skill points. Ding, mana drain activated, restoring 120 mana points. Ding, you consumed 120 mana points and used 4 fireball spell scrolls. Ding, you killed. Ding, you consumed 3,000 experience points to raise your arcane master level to LV4. Ding, your intelligence has increased, currently at 25 points. Ding, you consumed 4 skill points to upgrade the advance. D specialty quick casting to LV4. Casting speed increased by 200%. Ding, you consumed 270 mana points. Ding, you killed. Ding, you restored. Ding, you killed a total of 189 trolls, earning 12,000 experience points and 10 skill points. Ding, you achieved a small-scale brilliant victory, earning an additional 3,000 experience points and 3 skill points. Ding, you changed the fate of 675 people, earning 200 fate coins. The constant stream of notifications sounded like music to Matthew's ears at this moment. Resisting the urge to hum a tune, he noticed that the surrounding people were looking at him with respect and a touch of fear. Time to maintain the low-level, mysterious, and powerful image. The rewards were delightful, with his total experience points reaching 82,000, enough to level up to 9, ensuring his sustained combat capability. His precious fate coins had reached an unprecedented 2,800 points. This meant that he had already altered the life and death fate of over 2,000 people. His skills had accumulated 18 points. To unleash the fireball scrolls as quickly as possible and catch the trolls off guard, Matthew had upgraded his advanced specialty, quick casting 3 times, using up 9 points. He also upgraded the advanced specialty, mana drain once, consuming 2 points. Now Matthew could cast a spell in just about 0.5 seconds. Every enemy killed had a 50% chance to restore 10 mana points. Matthew had taken another firm and important step toward becoming a true spellcasting artillery. Matthew decided to save the remaining 7 skill points for unexpected needs in future battles. After all, new guests were about to arrive. On a personal level, the gains were tremendous, making Matthew extremely happy. Glancing at his luck value, which had returned to normal at 0, Matthew couldn't help but reflect. Tusk, the troll commander's judgment and vision weren't bad. Realizing we were just a small force, they went all out, planning to use their numbers for an overwhelming victory. I really should thank you for your cooperation, once again slipping away, Shadow Hunter. Matthew reviewed the battle log and found the Shadow Hunter had shattered 2 of his illusions. Even under the barrage of fireball spells, the cunning and formidable Shadow Hunter had only suffered 6 points of splash damage. Though it was a pity not to have finished him off, Matthew wasn't too disappointed. Killing a high-level professional couldn't be done with just fireball spells alone. It wasn't that fireball spells lacked damage, it was that the opponent could dodge, block, or even destroy the fireballs with various methods. Still, Matthew had to give the fleeing Shadow Hunter credit. What had seemed like a strong ogre camp was like that country in Matthew's world. It surrendered far too quickly. Matthew had worried that his 100 fireball spell scrolls might not get much use. But the Shadow Hunter had brought his troops right to the doorstep, delivering them. What a good guy. To kill 189 trolls, Matthew had used up 50 fireball spell scrolls, spending a total of 50,000 gold coins. Was the investment worth it? He made an absolute killing. The troll offensive was neutralized, their morale shattered. In the short term, they definitely wouldn't dare approach this area. Matthew could calmly bring in personnel and supplies. He would build a large, well-defended camp here. This would serve as a forward base for the expansion of Troll Valley. Most importantly, they suffered no casualties, and his reputation had skyrocketed. Achieving this strategic objective alone was worth it. Not to mention, Matthew also reaped massive economic benefits. The 160 captured trolls, once nourished for a month, would recover from their crippled state. The trolls' extraordinary self-healing ability was that strong and unreasonable. Then these trolls would voluntarily join the blood donation cause to atone for their sins. Every day after that, they would generate no less than 500 gold coins in value. Only through this would they redeem themselves, truly reforming and becoming creators of wealth. And then, in less than 100 days, Matthew would recoup his costs, and the rest would be pure profit. Was there a more profitable investment than this? Chapter 116, Planting Devil's Root. Chapter 116, Planting Devil's Root. The battle was over. The soldiers and adventurers continued to keep themselves busy. They had to clear the trees and shrubs around the camp to create an open buffer zone without any cover. Everyone worked diligently, knowing that the better the camp was built, the safer they would be. Troll Valley was full of danger, with trolls and even mid to high-level magical creatures roaming everywhere. This ogre camp would be a safe haven for everyone to rest and retreat if needed. After dealing with the troll corpses, Old Village Chieffield approached the mysterious and powerful Arcane Master for advice and received the order to build the camp. With the way the Lord is nurturing us, our territory will surely produce more spellcasters in the future. There will be people as powerful as the Arcane Master. Suppressing his excitement, Field commanded the people to haul over the trees felled by the female ogres. Old Village Chieffield expertly gave orders, cutting the trees of various sizes, trimming off the excess branches, and stacking them neatly. He also marked the boundaries for expanding the camp, leading people to dig a small trench to outline the construction zone. He handed over the digging work to the eager Jiffin. The female ogres, who had just finished chopping down all the large trees in the designated area and enjoyed a satisfying meal of salted fish, saw the hundreds of captured, crippled trolls and quickly became docile. Being alive and having food, life was already pretty good. So when Jiffin approached with a large bag of black bread, he easily led away 40 female ogres. They were to dig a trench around the entire camp as part of the foundation for the defensive walls. The chubby ogre cubs followed along as well, and Jiffin playfully handed them a bunch of tools, using food to entice them to start huffing and puffing as they learned. Work, trade for bread, this became the ogres' new rallying cry. Although the female ogres' work was rough and unrefined, their serious attitude was unmistakable. To Old Village Chieffield, this was a very positive sign, and he couldn't help but think to himself, kobolds are great, but they're too small and can only do light work. These ogres, on the other hand, hearing this, Alice couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. As expected, it's not just the Lord of Bay territory who's extraordinary. Even the professionals and soldiers here are strange. Normally, adventurers would run the moment they see ogres, who would go after them, defeat them, capture them, and then force them to work for them, and which territory soldiers would willingly march into dangerous forests and eliminate threats before they could grow. Just as she was thinking this, Alice heard her teammates eagerly ask, "Captain, while the trolls are scattered, shouldn't we go on the offensive?" "Yeah, every captured troll is worth 50 gold coins. We could use patrol duty as an excuse, head out and finish off those fleeing trolls nearby." "Exactly, this opportunity won't last long. If we don't act quickly, the trolls will escape." Looking at her team, who were itching to hunt trolls, Alice suddenly realized. What kind of normal adventurers would actively chase down trolls in a dangerous, dark forest? If none of them were normal, then there was nothing strange about it. Having thought it through, Alice chuckled to herself and led her team out on a patrol. While everyone else outside was busy, Matthew, inside his tent, was carefully examining the devil's root in his hand. Its grey-brown skin was slightly wrinkled. More than 10 long roots covered its surface. After peeling back the skin, the interior revealed greyish-white flesh. Both in appearance and texture, it looked nearly identical to the devil's root Matthew knew. However, in this world, its value was much higher. After careful observation, the data display clearly provided enough information. Devil's root, basic magic plant. Consumption effect, removes low-level toxins, restores vitality/mana. Potion usage, basic antidote, restoration potion, recovery potion, nutrient supplement, etc. Habit analysis, prefers sunlight, thrives on excrement as fertilizer, requires earth element replenishment for rooting and growth. Planting requirements, bury it 2 meters underground, 1 square meter of root, replenish about 1 kilogram of fertilizer per month, clear surface growth, and add more fertilizer every 3 months. Normal yield, 300 pounds per acre every 6 months. Market price, 50 silver coins per pound. Matthew raised an eyebrow in pleasant surprise, playing with the devil's root in his hand, hardly able to believe it. Devil's root has a wide range of uses. It can be eaten directly or used as an ingredient for potions. The key is that it can be grown in large quantities. With a potential annual yield of 600 pounds per acre, it could increase even more in the future. This is some valuable stuff. Matthew immediately thought about expanding the production of devil's root on a large scale. In fact, if he established a special production base, devil's root could become another pillar of his overseas industry. A yield of 600 pounds per acre could generate 300 gold coins in revenue. For others, planting devil's root underground might be a major hassle. Both planting and harvesting would require significant manpower and resources. But things were different in Bay territory. Obedient kobolds meant there were virtually no labor or material costs. Perhaps the only expense would be the consumption of earth elements to replenish the devil's root. With 300 gold coins in value, the net profit could easily reach 250 gold coins. An acre of land could generate 250 gold coins annually. What about 10 acres? What about 100 acres? The untapped wilderness surrounding Bay territory stretched for millions of acres. Most importantly, devil's root wasn't like alchemical potions or magical items. It didn't rely heavily on the market or sales channels. Even if it couldn't be sold, turning it into a nutrient supplement for the territory's professionals would still be incredibly valuable. Moreover, what Matthew valued most was using it to build reserves, providing extra meals for the children in the territory, and nurturing more professionals. Recruiting talent could indeed help the territory grow quickly. But only by cultivating homegrown talent, constantly generating fresh blood, could the territory develop healthily and steadily. In his past life, Matthew had suffered from a lack of stable foundations. He had been on par with his enemies in terms of strength, but his unstable foundation caused him to lose everything. This time, Matthew was determined to lay a strong foundation and maintain perfect control over his entire territory. What you hold in your hand is what truly belongs to you. Once his strength was firmly established, he would settle the score with them all. Chapter 117, Matthew's Expectations. Chapter 117, Matthew's Expectations, April 13th. The third day of establishing the ogre camp. Dark Forest, Troll Valley. A gentle drizzle of misty rain fell continuously. A veil of mist covered the entire valley. Occasionally, piercing howls echoed through the fog, carrying the eerie cold unique to the dark forest. The blackened tree trunks glistened slightly, as if they were breathing again after soaking up the moisture. From the buried pits, resilient plants were already sprouting tender shoots from the churned-up earth. They grew rapidly, greedily soaking up the sunlight in the absence of tall trees above, flourishing quickly. 1, 2, 1, the ground trembled slightly. These bright green shoots swayed gently, seemingly welcoming their arrival. Over 100 soldiers marched forward, in perfect unison. More than 500 wagon drivers anxiously scanned their surroundings, relaxing slightly only when they saw the unburned remains of the trolls. Over 50 wagons loaded with supplies struggled through the muddy roads. And this was just the first batch of supplies. Hundreds more wagons were being loaded up to follow. Along with the convoy came adventurers filled with curiosity. The first wave of adventurers who had ventured into Troll Valley, those who survived, had made a killing. Attracted by the huge profits, adventurers who had reached level 5 and earned over 50 contribution points from Bay territory were reorganizing into teams and joining the expedition. With over 1,000 people, including 400 to 500 armed forces, the once dominant troll tribe of Troll Valley was thoroughly crushed, leaving them free to roam. They encountered no danger on their journey and safely arrived at the ogre camp. This only boosted everyone's confidence. At least Troll Valley wasn't as dangerous as they had imagined. Soon, many began eagerly discussing how to make a fortune in Troll Valley. After all, yesterday, Alice's adventurer team had been personally commended by the Lord right before their eyes. Each member received a valuable enchanted piece of equipment. Everyone was green with envy. The ground at the entrance to the ravine, littered with troll bones, left every adventurer in disbelief. Were they all killed by fireball spells? That's right. Look at the fractures in the bones, they were torn apart by sheer force. You can tell from the marks on the ground. Was it really over 100 fireball spells cast all at once? Very likely. I can't even begin to fathom how powerful that mysterious arcane master must be. Don't think too much about it. With the arcane master's sweep, that troll tribe won't be able to resist anymore. We should start moving. Exactly. Before Alice's team returns, we should take advantage of the time. You're right. Wait, what's that? Is that ogres? Yes, those are ogres and they've already been tamed. The tall Beelzebub walked over with some sentries and exchanged a few words with Leon, the leader. These ogres are already accustomed to work, but we must still forbid others from interacting with them. Also, make sure the adventurers don't start digging. Knowing what lay underground, Leon nodded silently. He looked at the female ogres wielding axes, diligently chopping wood, and couldn't help but be amazed. I never thought it would actually work. Did the arcane master really pull this off with arcane methods? I wonder if the Lord plans to add these ogres to the battle ranks as well. If they could also be trained, that would be quite something. After letting his mind wander for a moment, Leon led the convoy toward the troll camp. Beelzebub chatted with him while giving an overview of the camp and the surrounding area as they made the final handover. He would soon return to Bay territory to carry out the training tasks assigned by the Lord. The barbarian soldiers have impressive physical talents, but their lack of systematic training and combat skills prevents them from fully utilizing their potential. Beelzebub was tempted by this opportunity and could sense an underlying message in the Lord's words. The Lord trusts us greatly and hopes to entrust us with important responsibilities. The Lord values us highly without distinguishing us from others. Thinking this over, Beelzebub couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. He watched Leon, under the guidance of Old Village Chieffield, organizing patrols, establishing rules for the adventurers, and discussing the development of the camp. Beelzebub listened carefully, absorbing as much as he could about management and organization. Now Beelzebub understood why, despite their strength, the barbarian tribes had never been able to defeat the Eastern Empire over hundreds of years. Perhaps the war has already been lost. With that thought, Beelzebub solidified his resolve, letting go of distractions and fully committing himself to Bay territory. There was a brighter future here. The two groups completed their handover. The potential soldiers, led by Leon, would be stationed in the dangerous Troll Valley. Not only would they guard the troll camp, but they would actively hunt down the remaining trolls and dangerous magical creatures. Matthew had high hopes for them, hoping they would hone their skills, gain battle experience, and rapidly improve their strength. Led by Beelzebub, the barbarians, along with the well-compensated adventurers, began their journey back to Bay Village. Stories of wealth needed more advertising. By noon, hundreds of elderly villagers pushed food carts, weaving between fields and meadows. Lunchtime, take a break. The rich smell of food filled the air, accompanied by cheerful shouts spreading across the flat plains. The farmers, who had been hard at work all morning, gathered with smiles. They chatted about the details of the morning's work, while asking what meals were being served today. Every face shone with hope for the future. The enticing smell of food spread across the fields, briefly bringing peace to the busy landscape. A group of soldiers emerged from the nearby dark forest, drawing curious gazes from everyone. The barbarians in the group eagerly raised their heads and waved, excitedly explaining to the crowd, "It looks like it's Beelzebub's team, and there are adventurers with them. Judging by their smiles, they must have made a lot of money. I've heard many adventurers have struck it rich. Adventurers may earn more, but they also face far greater dangers than soldiers. That's true. The Lord treats soldiers very well, there's no doubt about that. It's a shame I haven't been able to meet the standards after months of training. Then keep training for a few more months. Haha, that's true. Chapter 118 Special Training. Chapter 118 Special Training. The breeze is faithful, the autumn moon boundless. My longing for her makes days feel like years. Humming a light tune, Matthew as usual carefully inspected each troll. He had to ensure that none of the trolls were hiding their strength, which could lead to dangerous situations. After all, the trolls under his control were now nearing 1,000. Being a gold mine that continuously generated coins for Bay territory, it was worth being extra cautious. Moreover, Matthew could also find a special reward from these trolls: new specialties. Ever since he gained the specialty analysis inheritance, Matthew had been collecting all kinds of specialties. Whether they belonged to spellcasters, soldiers, or adventurers, he accepted them all. A good specialty, regardless of its origin, was valuable. The captured trolls and ogres were no exception. The more specialties he collected, the stronger his hand became. This was the powerful method that allowed a force to cultivate professionals, a foundation that could be called the cornerstone of inheritance. Perhaps, as Matthew accumulated more and more specialties, he could eventually master the specialties of almost every type of professional. At that point, Bay Territory could rapidly produce powerful professionals. These trolls gave Matthew quite a pleasant surprise. The basic specialties included initiative, rapid fire, throwing, trap detection, and 12 others. The intermediate specialties included polearm mastery, precision throwing, strength burst, defense mastery, and vital area protection. There was one advanced specialty, advanced toughness, constitution +1, heavy injury resistance +3, health regeneration +1. The basic and intermediate specialties were about quantity, and the number was satisfactory to Matthew, providing more training directions for his soldiers. The advanced toughness specialty greatly delighted Matthew. This rare specialty could directly enhance physical attributes. Matthew highly valued this specialty because he wanted to learn it for himself. After all, what professional would complain about being too physically strong? After all, a strong body is the foundation of revolution. Additionally, advanced toughness was not only highly practical, but also the prerequisite for the extraordinary toughness specialty. Extraordinary toughness, constitution +3, heavy injury resistance +10, health regeneration +3, immunity to instant death. Just the immunity to instant death alone was something every melee professional would dream of. Even some legendary warriors coveted this specialty, but couldn't obtain it. Matthew had even heard that the extraordinary toughness specialty could be further improved. With his specialty analysis now upgraded to LV4, Matthew could perfectly gather information and training methods for advanced specialties. Your specialty is excellent, but now it belongs to me. Half an hour later, Matthew met with the returning Beelzebub, the burly barbarian warrior, who seemed a bit nervous. Perhaps the more invested one is, the harder it is to let go. Before Beelzebub could speak, Matthew nodded to Arnold beside him and continued with instructions. The training matters are entrusted to you, Instructor Arnold. Instructor Arnold, brimming with excitement, was engrossed in the scroll Matthew had handed him. Reading it with fervor, he only nodded in response to Matthew's words. No problem with these methods, I'll definitely train them successfully. The old instructor was fully absorbed, unable to extricate himself. Seeing Arnold so engrossed, Beelzebub felt a strange sense of amazement. He genuinely respected this old but vigorous instructor from the bottom of his heart. Arnold hadn't treated Beelzebub any differently just because he was a barbarian. Instead, he taught him fairly and even gave him extra care. Reflecting on his past in the barbarian lands, Beelzebub grew silent. When it came to learning combat techniques, it was nearly impossible to acquire them from others. Beelzebub remembered his days of learning, being treated like a beast of burden. And yet back then, I thought I was content with that life. Beelzebub, chosen as an elite soldier due to his exceptional physical talent, had received basic training in horseback riding and archery in the army, but even his weapons and rations had to be self-provided. Arnold's guidance had been incredibly effective for him. Especially after this recent campaign in Troll Valley and fighting the trolls again, Beelzebub could clearly feel his combat skills improving significantly. After 2 or 3 years of stagnation, he had unknowingly broken through his bottleneck. What did this mean? It meant that Arnold was an exceptional instructor. This deeply moved Beelzebub, and he remembered it well. But now, Arnold's attitude toward the Lord filled Beelzebub with many thoughts. Before he could ponder further, Matthew looked his way. Meeting those dark eyes, Beelzebub instinctively felt a jolt in his chest and lowered his head slightly. The Lord possessed an indescribable aura of authority. The training ahead will be very tough, but the results will be outstanding. You must take the lead and not let me down. Having just realized the meaning of authority and power, Beelzebub responded without hesitation. Rest assured, my lord, I will lead everyone and successfully complete the task. Noticing that Beelzebub had gained the specialties defensive stance and battlefield veteran, Matthew looked forward to seeing how far this talented barbarian warrior would go once he overcame his shortcomings in combat skills and specialties. The training was grueling. Beelzebub had known it would be hard, but he had never imagined it would be this tough. Wearing clothes weighted with nearly 50 kilograms of sandbags initially didn't seem like much to him. But after running 10 kilometers, throwing 50 javelins in a row, clearing several seemingly easy obstacles, and swimming 3 laps in a chest-deep pool, even someone as physically strong as Beelzebub was utterly exhausted. However, according to Instructor Arnold, this was merely the warm-up. Pick up the long-handled greatsword in front of you and recall the stances I just taught you. Ready, downward strike, upward slash, sweeping strike, advance, downward strike, faster. Did you all skip lunch? Just moments ago, Instructor Arnold had been all smiles, but now his face was contorted as he roared. He held a short whip in his hand, not using it on the barbarian soldiers but snapping it in the air with a sharp crack. You're all so big and strong, why are your moves so soft and weak like women? Put some effort into it. The exhausted barbarian soldiers, suddenly energized by Arnold's provocation, shouted and pushed through the training. The weapons they had been so happy to wield earlier now felt as heavy as mountains. It was truly painful. Excruciating. Chapter 119 Nutrient Potions. Chapter 119 Nutrient Potions. Kill. The loud shouts of battle echoed across the training ground. The barbarian soldiers were sweating profusely. Their voices were hoarse, but exuded an unmatched strength. Matthew shifted his gaze away from them, focusing on the devil's root in his hand, carefully reviewing Instructor Arnold's secret recipe. Nutrient Potion, Intermediate Potion, Success Rate, 65%. Having not even practiced yet, the success rate was already so high, Matthew felt entirely confident and turned to head towards the laboratory, instructing butler Ralph as he went, "Notify the armory. That batch of semi-finished products can now be processed. Also, issue the territory defense task. It's time for the adventurers to pitch in for us." Thinking about the distress communication from Adam Smith, butler Ralph looked at Matthew's calm face and said nothing, immediately going to arrange and coordinate matters. Exhaling softly, Matthew glanced at his restored luck value and walked into the laboratory. Bright light illuminated the entire lab. What was once the size of a small chamber had been expanded into a miniature plaza. The walls had been transformed by Matthew's magic into thick stone walls using the mud to stone spell. The walls were etched with complex magical runes, including enchantments for material reinforcement, corrosion resistance, shock absorption, soundproofing, and anti-surveillance spells. The stone chambers were separated into different laboratories. In the largest golem laboratory, Mountain was hard at work. The smooth walls reflected the image of new clay golems being formed. Mountain's form had subtly changed to resemble a human more closely, as it stood before a nearly completed clay golem. Waves of earthy yellow elemental energy spread through the golem as Mountain lifted its hand, enveloping the entire clay figure. Matthew could clearly see that wherever Mountain's hand touched the clay golem, complex magical structures began forming rapidly. Interestingly, after finishing the magic structure on the arm of the first golem, Mountain moved to the second clay golem and started working on its arm. In no time, all 5 clay golem's arms were completed, and Mountain returned to the first golem to work on the other arm. It seemed that Mountain was already experimenting with assembler line production techniques. Perhaps soon, Matthew's plan to upgrade Mountain into a more advanced tool might become a reality. Arriving in the potion lab, Matthew began processing the materials needed for the nutrient potions. Thanks to Old Village Chief Field's years of accumulation and the adventurer's thorough search of the dark forest's outer edges, Bay Territory had amassed hundreds of magical plants and materials, and they had identified their locations, putting measures in place for their protection. In the future, Matthew planned to establish a dedicated cultivation base to mass-produce these materials. Nutrient potion production was relatively easy, and Matthew followed the instructions, processing each ingredient in turn. Then in a sterile cauldron, he added clear water, gradually sprinkling in the ingredients as the water heated up, and slowly began stirring. The clear water quickly turned dark green. Once the water reached a full boil, a faint, pungent odor emerged. Matthew stopped adding ingredients and took out the peeled devil's root, placing the whole thing into the cauldron. The boiling water bubbled fiercely. The devil's root dissolved completely, turning the dark green liquid into a lighter green, while the pungent smell gradually faded. Potion effect 56%, success rate 98%. Potion effect 60%, success rate 96%. Potion effect 65%, success rate 94%. When the potion effect reached 80% and the success rate stabilized at 88%, Matthew stopped the brewing process. The large pot of emerald green liquid slowly cooled, and Matthew poured it into an automatic potion bottling machine. The potion flowed down through the transparent glass tubes, filling rows of 50-milliliter bottles. Once a row of 10 bottles was filled, a raised float closed the potion pipe, stopping the flow. A row of corks dropped neatly into place, sealing the potion bottles. The tray of filled bottles descended, and a box filled with cushioning material was brought in from the sides, wrapping the bottles securely. Another row of empty potion bottles was loaded, the float lowered, and the potion resumed flowing. Devil's Root Nutrient Potion, Intermediate Recovery Potion. After consumption, it rapidly restores stamina and vitality, providing a large amount of nutrition. Market price, 80 silver coins. Matthew was quite satisfied with the effect of the Devil's Root nutrient potion. With their help, the professional's high-intensity training plan could proceed steadily. More importantly, a pound of Devil's Root sold for 50 silver coins. That pound could be used to make 50 bottles of nutrient potion, with a total value of 40 gold coins. The potential was huge. However, while there was currently plenty of Devil's Root in the ogre camp, if no cultivation began soon, the supply would eventually run out. Once this current enemy is dealt with, the magic plant and material cultivation plan must begin. After all, the number of professionals in Bay territory would continue to grow, and the demand for resources would keep rising. Constantly buying from outside would only leave them dependent on others. Having their own production capabilities would allow Bay territory to develop more quickly and securely. Moreover, Matthew had a vague idea forming in his mind. From the perspective of attracting talent, recruitment is somewhat passive. If they actively come to Bay territory, it often brings more surprises. This is the perfect opportunity to make Bay territory famous, and while we're at it, build a transit base. The freshly brewed 100 bottles of nutrient potion were quickly distributed to the barbarian soldiers. An excited instructor Arnold shouted at the top of his lungs, "Haha, you lucky bastards, drink up. You get half an hour of rest after downing these potions." The sweat-soaked barbarian soldiers, panting heavily, curiously inspected the potions in their hands. Beelzebub licked the salty sweat from his lips and downed the nutrient potion in one gulp. The cool liquid slid down his throat, instantly dispelling his fatigue and exhaustion. With a surprised raise of his eyebrows, he eagerly shouted, "Drink up quickly and rest. We'll resume training soon." The other barbarian soldiers didn't hesitate, gulping down the potions and letting out satisfied ahs as the coolness hit them. Matthew glanced at their training progress, put down his binoculars, and returned to making more nutrient potions. He planned to brew enough potions to cover the next few days of training. Time was of the essence, because he also needed to create custom weapons and equipment for the barbarian soldiers. After some time training and assessing them, Matthew concluded that training the barbarian soldiers to be obedient, highly coordinated formation soldiers was a waste. He had a better plan in mind. Chapter 120, The Worried Adam Smith. Chapter 120, The Worried Adam Smith. Time passed in a flash. April 22. The sky was clear, as blue as a wash. The blazing sun hung high in the sky, like a massive fireball, enthusiastically releasing its energy. Blood Moon City, southeastern warehouse district. Adam Smith's Thorn Caravan had purchased a massive warehouse here. Outside the warehouse was bustling, crowded with pushcart workers preparing to depart. Inside was still busy, as the final batch of goods was being loaded onto the carriages. In the center of the warehouse, boxes of magic crystals were carefully placed onto the carriages. Adam Smith directed them while anxiously glancing outside the training ground, always feeling a sense of foreboding. Last time they returned to Blood Moon City, Adam Smith thought that with the clay golems brought from Bay territory and the elite soldiers representing his status, he could quell the greed of those guys. But he never expected that those people were so arrogant. Not only did they show no intention of negotiating, but they even attempted to assassinate him. Adam Smith nearly died. That lethal arrow, before anyone could react, shot straight towards his chest. Even his personal guard, Captain Mellon, didn't expect someone to be so bold as to attempt an assassination in Blood Moon City. In the split second when he couldn't dodge, Adam Smith could even see the faint blue poison gleaming on the tip of that deadly arrow. They wanted him dead. Fortunately, people hesitate out of shock, but the clay golems do not. Adam Smith, still haunted by fear, vividly remembered the towering clay golem stepping in front of him, bringing a wave of relief and anger to his head. Thus, when Adam Smith received the secret letter from Bay territory, he decisively chose to comply. He waited a few more days, gathered more supplies, and recruited more refugees. At the same time, Adam Smith spread the news of the assassination attempt throughout Blood Moon City. Conveniently, he also promoted his Thorn Caravan and Bay territory. The purpose was to warn those guys, "I know it was your doing." Adam Smith checked the time, then glanced at the caravan members performing their final inspections. The time had come. He led 2 clay golems into the heavily guarded teleportation chamber. As the blue teleportation light flashed, 50 figures appeared before Adam Smith. Adam Smith instantly recognized the burly Beelzebub, feeling a surge of tension as he saw the dark red armor he was wearing. Has his strength grown even stronger? The other barbarian soldiers, also clad in thick steel armor, simply standing there, exerted an invisible pressure on him. Adam Smith could clearly feel that the strength of these barbarian soldiers had also greatly increased. He felt a deep sense of gratitude that the Lord had not abandoned him. At that moment, a cloaked figure stepped out from behind Beelzebub. It was Matthew's illusion clone, a mysterious arcanist. Half an hour later, with Adam Smith's order, the massive convoy set out. At the forefront were the well-armed soldiers from Bay Territory. Marching in formation, they chanted loudly as they exited the city gates, drawing the envious and curious gazes of onlookers. Following the soldiers was a convoy covered in oilcloth. In the convoy of over 200 carriages, more than 2,000 pushcart workers strained together. On both sides of the convoy, adventurers who had agreed to join them followed along. Many of them were curiously discussing, does Bay Territory really reward 50 gold coins for killing a troll? Unless it's a guarding or patrolling task, you don't get paid for killing a troll. But if you capture one, you can earn 50 gold coins. That's right, I came back specifically to call everyone to make some money. There are over 400 adventurers in our group alone, right? Are there that many trolls in the dark forest? Heh, this is just the start. There are millions of trolls in the dark forest. Enough for everyone to get rich for life. Did the Lord of Bay Territory set a limit on how many trolls we can capture? No limits at all. I heard from Butler Ralph that the more, the better. And I heard that Bay Territory is already preparing to develop Troll Valley. Some people have already gotten rich. See that group over there? They've already been recruited. What's in those carriages? Food, weapons, materials, and clay golems. Bay Territory is developing rapidly now. The most important thing is that the Lord is incredibly generous, willing to spend gold coins. Unlike the adventurers who felt joy and anticipation, the refugees at the rear of the convoy appeared anxious. Most of the refugees wanted to stay in Blood Moon City and were unwilling to venture into the dangerous wilderness. Too many had already fallen along the way. Unfortunately, Blood Moon City didn't welcome them. To be more precise, almost no territories or towns welcomed them. Their identities were unclear, and not every refugee possessed skills or abilities that could make these towns give them a chance. Most of the refugees recruited by Adam Smith, with promises of food and a bright future, were families, the elderly, or those who couldn't survive on their own. So even if it was just for a bite to eat, they chose to continue following Adam Smith. The only thing that gave them some reassurance was that Adam Smith had purchased over 500 carriages with fitted compartments. He allowed the weak, elderly, and children who couldn't handle the long march to ride in the carriages, while others traveled light. Adam Smith wasn't just looking out for them, he was also considering the convoy's speed. He turned his head, gazing at Blood Moon City perched halfway up the mountainside, feeling as if someone was watching him. The enemy's intentions must still be malicious. Filled with some worry, Adam Smith glanced at the clay golem beside him and said to his vigilant guard Captain Mellon, "Notify the adventurers around us to scout the surroundings, making sure they travel in groups of at least 5. If anything seems off, tell them not to act rashly." Guard Captain Mellon didn't think Adam Smith was overreacting. Instead, he nodded in full agreement. "No problem, I'll remind them. Maybe you should head inside first." Adam Smith didn't argue and climbed into the carriage, a specially designed armored wagon that had cost him 9,000 gold coins. It could defend against sword strikes and resist long-range attacks from crossbows. It even offered decent protection against destructive spells like fireball. As soon as Adam Smith got inside, he saw Matthew peeking through the window, quickly starting a conversation. "I heard that the territorial guards have increased their patrols. Those guys shouldn't dare to attack on the main road, right?" Pulling his gaze away from Blood Moon City in the distance, Matthew heard Adam Smith's question and, looking at the ominous scene outside, calmly replied in a deep voice, "Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." Chapter 121, Old Acquaintance. Chapter 121, Old Acquaintance. Seeing Adam Smith nod silently, Matthew naturally wouldn't tell him. "You've barely escaped death and now you're close to dying again." Yes, Adam Smith had just narrowly avoided a certain death with a luck value of -5. Now his luck wasn't -5, but it was still a death omen of -4. Moreover, he wasn't the only one. Most of the people in the convoy outside also had dangerously low luck values, signaling impending doom. It seemed that the enemy planning to strike was powerful and ruthless, clearly intending to leave no survivors. However, the enemy's boldness only piqued Matthew's curiosity. At this point in time, Sweetwater Town had just been destroyed, drawing the attention of the Netheril Empire. Any major actions now would likely attract the notice of scouts. Currently, the Netheril Empire still maintained a strong grip on its territory. It wouldn't be until next year's Orc Frenzy that they would begin to lose control and gradually fall into collapse. We can't rely too much on the patrols. Since the enemy dares to strike, they must be prepared. Matthew put down the newspaper and went back to studying the map. Absent-mindedly rubbing the thick parchment, suddenly thinking, it seems paper hasn't been invented yet. A single sheet of parchment costs 50 copper coins. But regular paper could easily be produced for just 2 copper coins. Unfortunately, I'm not strong enough right now, otherwise I'd have plenty of ways to make money. The world is cruel. And the battle for profit is far more challenging than killing. Hundreds of trolls and ogres. As a member of the Sir family, Matthew had developed the Sir family's most lucrative financial route, yet still faced envy from others. If he brought to fruition those ideas in his mind, mass-produced and promoted them, what awaited him might not be just assassination attempts anymore. Noticing Matthew putting down the newspaper, Adam Smith felt his headache ease. Suddenly, he patted his forehead and respectfully handed over a storage belt. "This is from the Lord for you." Letting out a low hum, Matthew accepted the belt and scanned it with his mental power. Inside were over 10 new first circle spell scrolls, 100 second circle spell scrolls, 50 fireball scrolls, 3 high-level spell scrolls. Lastly, there was a small teleportation formation. Adam Smith didn't stare at him, keeping his head down as he continued. 2 sets of small teleportation formations, with a total value of 10,000 gold coins. Each small teleportation formation can transfer 50 people or 1 million pounds of goods per activation. It consumes 100 gold coins worth of magic crystals per activation. And after 100 activations, it needs to be inspected and repaired. Medium teleportation formations are not yet for sale in Blood Moon City. You would need to meet with the City Lord. Matthew wasn't surprised by this. Small teleportation formations required high-level spellcasters to create. Medium formations needed even more advanced casters, and only the City Lord of Blood Moon City had such power at the moment. For various reasons, Matthew didn't want to contact the City Lord right now. Glancing at the now calm Adam Smith, he asked, "Do you have any information on the enemies?" Adam Smith quickly took out 2 scrolls and continued to report to Matthew. "These are intelligence reports from both the Lord's Manor and the Assassin's Guild." Seeing Matthew take the scrolls and carefully examine them, Adam Smith explained, "There are 3 suspects. Railed from the Redwood merchants, Lynch from the Blackstone merchants, and Lark from the Pfizer caravan. The first 2 are my old rivals, and they've had dealings with each other before. I have. Ent had much contact with Lark from the Pfizer caravan, but he once tried to get me to stop selling blood rejuvenation potions in Blood Moon City or sell them to him at a low price. Pfizer merchants. Lark, another old acquaintance. Matthew didn't have much memory of the first 2 suspects. But when it came to Lark from the Pfizer caravan, he knew him very well. Lark was one of the most powerful merchants in Blood Moon City. Even within the entire Pfizer caravan, he was one of the top decision-makers. Though young, Lark had risen through the ranks thanks to his family's legacy and sharp wit, becoming the head of Pfizer's operations in the Eastern Province. Even now, he controlled more than 10% of the Eastern Province's trade market and resources. Matthew and the other players had even been hired by him before, completing many tasks, so Matthew knew him inside out. A cunning, profit-driven, cold-blooded and greedy capitalist. Yes, in this magic-filled fantasy world, Lark could definitely be called a capitalist. Now, the young Lark was already quite powerful. In the future, he would shine even brighter. In the entire Eastern Province, Lark's word would almost be law. Having seen Lark's methods firsthand, Matthew wasn't surprised that almost no one in the caravan would be spared. Lark never left any witnesses. His dark eyes glimmered with cold light, and beneath his cloak, the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. Matthew felt a strange sense of anticipation for the upcoming battle. Without hesitation, Matthew decisively used 100 fake coins. Ding! Choose to leave, -4 Death Omen. Choose to stay, -3 Bloodshed Disaster. Both options signified danger, and Matthew quickly realized. Fate's choices were not infallible, they only presented 2 extreme possibilities. If the enemy's plans reached an unstoppable point, death would still be inevitable. This served as a reminder to Matthew not to place blind faith in fate. I choose to stay. Nothing changed in the immediate situation, but Adam Smith's luck value subtly shifted from -4 to -3. This clearly showed that Matthew's choice had an effect. However, it still didn't guarantee everyone's safety. Casualties would be unavoidable. Exhaling slightly, Matthew's expression remained calm, and without explaining anything to Adam Smith, he nodded solemnly and said, "Even if they have plans, they won't make a move near Blood Moon City. Also, there are informants in our convoy. They'll definitely come to us, informants." Adam Smith's heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively wanted to get out of the carriage to investigate, but seeing the Arcanist remain unbothered, he relaxed slightly. Adam Smith couldn't have known that Matthew hadn't actually made any arrangements, and instead, without hesitation, said, "Go out and have people search, paying special attention to the people in carriage number 63 among the refugees. But don't apprehend them yet, we don't want to alert the enemy. They were the spies." Chapter 122, Using a Stratagem. Chapter 122, Using a Stratagem at noon. The scorching sun baked the earth. The muddy ground cracked open in places. Even the hazy mist had mostly dissipated, revealing patches of swampy puddles. Twisted eyes occasionally peered out from the grayish-yellow reeds, but after seeing the size of the convoy, they obediently retreated. Their creed was to bully the weak and fear the strong. By midday, the convoy had left the control of Blood Moon City and arrived at the outskirts of the misty marsh. Adam Smith, looking grim, stepped down from the carriage and pointed to a nearby hill. "Stop and rest, prepare to cook." Then, in front of everyone, he reprimanded his personal guards. Soon, the guards began searching and questioning within the convoy. They approached the temporary leaders of each group, casting scrutinizing glances at everyone they saw. The people in the convoy were confused. They didn't know what had happened. The pushcart workers stopped, skillfully checking the vehicles and confirming everything was in order. The squad leaders fed the mules, covertly observing the pushcart workers. If they could find a suspicious person, they might win Adam Smith's favor. The adventurers returned from all directions. They had only found traces of fishmen, but hadn't engaged with anyone. They wouldn't casually provoke those endlessly multiplying monsters unless necessary. Another team of guards moved to the hill, skillfully digging pits, lighting fires, setting up stoves and placing pots. As the water boiled, the rich aroma of meat quickly spread. The refugees in the back, smelling the scent, immediately calmed down. As long as there was food, they would be obedient. The refugees took out small stools, sitting down to rest while whispering to each other. "What are they looking for? Did someone steal something? They seem to be looking for a fugitive." "No, I heard they're searching for someone specific. Something doesn't feel right. What exactly is happening? Don't worry about it, just rest for now." "That's right, we still have a few days of travel ahead." Everyone kept their voices low, trying not to appear too tense. The personal guards only asked questions and didn't take any action. This made everyone even more curious about what was going on. The carriages full of elderly, weak, and women opened their doors and windows, revealing thin faces. This was the result of a few days of recovery. When they first arrived in Blood Moon City, they were on the brink of collapse, pale and weak. Now, smelling the food, their faces showed anticipation. After suffering through hunger, they only longed for a full meal. In one of the crowded carriages, a slender figure, seeing the approaching guards, couldn't help but feel nervous. If discovered, she might face mortal danger. She was beginning to regret it, but she quickly forced herself to calm down and squeeze to the window like the others. Captain Mellon of the personal guard approached, noticing the nervous old woman. Suppressing his thoughts, he smiled gently and asked, "No need to worry, ma'am. This is just a routine inquiry. Has anyone been acting unusual lately, like frequently going off alone out of everyone's sight?" The old woman nodded thoughtfully, then gently shook her head. Captain Mellon glanced up at the carriage, just catching a glimpse of a pair of frightened eyes, causing his heart to skip a beat. He decisively turned and moved on to the next carriage. Adam Smith had made it very clear: identify and confirm the target, but don't make it obvious. The old woman subtly turned back to the others in the carriage, lightly gesturing and saying in a hoarse voice, "Did you hear that? Keep an eye on anyone who goes off alone." Finally, she let out a breath of relief. Like everyone else, she quickly nodded, trying to show no signs of abnormality. Lunch was generous. The sweet and delicious rice porridge was even mixed with meat. Paired with hearty black bread, it replenished everyone's strength. It seemed the personal guards hadn't found anyone or any clues, and no further action was taken, as if it had just been a routine inquiry. The convoy quickly resumed its journey. Most people soon forgot about it, but she kept it in her mind, not daring to make any other moves. The blazing sun gradually lost its intensity. It sank into the heavy evening glow, dyeing the sky red. The clouds, unable to bear the sun's heat, scattered with a blush, forming strange shapes. Seeing the town in the distance, the tension that had gripped Adam Smith all day finally eased. Matthew withdrew his gaze from the convoy and pulled out a communication spell scroll, tearing it open as he said, "We can rest well tonight. The battle will happen tomorrow," Adam Smith immediately recalled. After Sweetwater Town was destroyed, the original route had to be changed, and the convoy could no longer reach a town every day. They could stay in a town tonight, but not tomorrow night. If anyone planned to attack, tomorrow night would be the best opportunity. Adam Smith silently nodded, then got off the carriage to make contact with the townspeople. He knew there was likely no danger today, but he still cautiously reminded his personal guards to stay alert throughout the convoy. Matthew looked at the blood-red moon, exhaled deeply, and slowly closed his eyes, sending his consciousness back. As soon as he opened his eyes again, he saw Yaya. She was staring at him with wide, black and white eyes, tilting her little head as she curiously observed Matthew's actions, asking in a bright voice, "What are you doing?" Matthew gently stroked her head, feeling the warmth of their connection, and softly replied, "Meditating, want to try?" "Can I do it too?" Matthew was about to nod when he suddenly realized. How did this little one get in here? Matthew carefully examined Yaya's status panel. Sure enough, her physical attributes had significantly improved since last time. Name, Yaya race, dragon beast. Class, level 1 warlock. Age, 2 months, wormling stage. Talent, true dragon bloodline LV1+, challenge rating, 9+, right arrow 10+. Equipment, shadow fang feats. Extraordinary feat dragons might LV2, unleashes terrifying pressure, imposing a -10 willpower resistance on all surrounding creatures. Extraordinary feat banishment breath LV2, causes a linear time banishment breath on objects or enemies, exiling them in time for 2 months. Attributes, strength, 12 right arrow 13 agility, 14 right arrow 15 intelligence, 18 right arrow 19 constitution, 14 right arrow 16 perception, 20 charisma, 22 luck +5. Evaluation, a leg you cannot afford to miss. Matthew instinctively raised an eyebrow. The true dragon bloodline can still be improved. Chapter 123, Yaya, huh? Am I the chosen one? Chapter 123, Yaya, huh? Am I the chosen one? Matthew examined closely, noticing that the plus sign after true dragon bloodline had become more detailed. Would you like to consume 50,000 experience points +1,000 fate coins to grant Yaya a perfect evolution? Feeling a pang of heartache, Matthew shuddered. Just a couple of days ago, he had been conflicted. How do I use all this experience without leveling up my class? I need to find a way to quickly turn it into combat power. Well, now it was gone. With Yaya's little bite, more than half had vanished, leaving him with only 200 experience points. As for fate coins, he still had 700 left, which was just barely sufficient. However, Matthew quickly began to console himself. Yaya and I are one. As she grows stronger, so do I. As Matthew made his choice, a blue light, visible only to him, quickly enveloped Yaya, who remained completely unaware. Smiling, Matthew said to her, "Meditation is the process where you train your mental strength and absorb elemental energy." The little one nodded along as she listened, completely oblivious to the changes happening in her body. She just found that what Matthew was saying became easier and easier to understand, and finally, with a moment of realization, she said, "Huh. Is this meditation? I think I get it." Then, she immediately closed her eyes and curled up in Matthew's lap, softly coiling her body. Who, listening to the sound of Yaya's soft breathing as she fell asleep, Matthew couldn't help but find it both amusing and frustrating that she could just fall asleep like that. Looking down, he saw that Yaya's shiny head now had 3 big words clearly written on it. In meditation, good grief. Did Yaya just combine meditation and sleep? Although Matthew found it hard to believe, the meditation ability on Yaya's status panel wasn't a lie. Meditation level +1, currently 2. Meditation level +1, currently 3. Meditation level +1. In no time at all, Yaya's meditation level had broken through the beginner stage, advancing smoothly to the intermediate level. This delighted Matthew, as it signified that Yaya's spellcasting abilities were finally progressing in the right direction. Matthew knew that the time left for him and his territory's development was limited. Yaya, as his most important trump card, would have to grow stronger to give him more room for maneuvering. For a dragon, whether developing in close combat or enhancing spellcasting, both had a bright future. But, given the limited time, the latter developed faster and could be converted into combat power sooner. Now that Yaya had finally begun improving her spellcasting, Matthew naturally wouldn't hesitate to invest more resources into her. The 50,000 experience points and 1,000 fate coins were clearly just the beginning. This special little one was undergoing yet another leap in her life. Matthew carefully observed Yaya, clearly able to see. As her body changed, her soul was also becoming more complex and magnificent. Intricate and complex patterns gradually appeared with Yaya's every breath. As if they had always been there, now they were simply manifesting naturally. This unique transformation left Matthew deeply amazed. Matthew savored the changes, feeling a faint premonition in his heart. The reason true dragons were super creatures was undoubtedly linked to this inherited power engraved deep in their bloodlines and souls. Imagine each true dragon's inheritance was like a door guarding a treasure trove. As time passed, the door grew larger, and more treasures could emerge to be utilized. The true dragon's task was simply to continuously enhance their body's strength, expand their capacity to bear the treasures, and digest what emerged, thereby naturally increasing their power. This was why every true dragon became strong. Such growth gave Matthew a lot of inspiration. In a sense, the growth path of professionals is similar to that of true dragons. Raising class levels is like strengthening the body and soul to accommodate more powerful feats and skills. If this ability could be quantified, even if professionals are limited by their talents and can't reach the extraordinary or legendary level, there could still be many more mid-tier and even high-tier professionals. Though this idea was promising, Matthew kept it buried in his heart. The timing wasn't right, and his abilities weren't enough yet. While keeping an eye on Yaeya's changes, he pulled out a new second circle spell scroll and began studying it carefully. About an hour later, Yaeya, having completed her evolution, stretched comfortably and yawned with satisfaction. She looked at her now expanded wings with surprise. Not only had they grown larger and stronger, but a pitch-black ring had also appeared on them. Yaeya could clearly feel that her control over time power had significantly improved. Previously, her control over time power had been a bit unstable and vague, only allowing her to use it clumsily. Now she felt she could manipulate it with much greater precision. Flapping her wings excitedly, Yaeya happily let out little cries of "Yaeya." Rubbing his forehead, Matthew set aside the more complex second circle spell scroll and carefully examined Yaeya's post-evolution stats. Then Matthew was completely stunned. Name: Yaeya. Race: Dragon Beast. Class: Level 1 Arcanist. Age: 2 months, Wormling Stage. Talent: True Dragon Bloodline LV2, all attributes +3, gains Bloodline abilities. Challenge rating: 10+, Right Arrow 12+. Equipment: Shadow Fang Feats. Extraordinary Feat Dragon's Might LV2, releases a terrifying aura that imposes a -10 willpower resistance on all nearby creatures. Extraordinary Feat Banishment Breath LV2, inflicts a linear time-banishing breath on objects or enemies, exiling them in time for 2 months. Extraordinary Feat True Dragon Body LV1, increases max health by +10, physical defense by +3, magical defense by +4, physical attack by +3, and spell attack by +4. Skills: 0 circle spells. Light Spell LV2, Minor Repair LV2, Cleaning Spell LV2. 1 circle spells: Magic Missile LV4, Sleep Spell LV4, Grease Spell LV2, Weakness Spell LV2. Special Spell: Illusion Clone. Abilities: Meditation 80, Knowledge 80, Perception 80, Evasion 50, Flight 60. Attributes: Strength, 13 Right Arrow 15, modifier +3 Agility, 15 Right Arrow 17, modifier +4 Intelligence, 19 Right Arrow 21, modifier +6 Constitution, 16 Right Arrow 18, modifier +4 Perception, 20 Right Arrow 22, modifier +6 Charisma, 22 Right Arrow 24, modifier +7 Luck, +5. Physical Attack 6, Spell Attack 10, Physical Defense 7. Spell Defense 8 Health Points, 32 +10 +10/52 Mana Points, 210 +10/220 Evaluation, The Chosen Dragon. Matthew tossed aside the scroll in his hand, muttering with a mix of amusement and frustration. What's the point of studying anymore? Chapter 124, Going All Out. Chapter 124, Going All Out. Patting his forehead, Matthew looked at Yaeya's incredibly dazzling stats and said sourly, as if he had just eaten several lemons, "Is this the power to change fate? Not only can she change her class, but she can also gain my abilities through the life contract. TCH, I want that too." No exaggeration, Yaeya, now a level 1 Arcanist, could be considered the strong ESD beginner level professional. Her challenge rating had already reached 13+. This meant that only a well-equipped, well-trained, and highly coordinated high-level party could stand a chance against Yaeya. Although it had cost him dearly, the results left Matthew extremely satisfied. Not to mention that Yaeya, having completed her class transformation, had undergone a crucial metamorphosis. From now on, like Matthew, she could continuously strengthen herself through studying and researching magic. She was no longer bound by the limitations of time and bloodline. What delighted Matthew even more was that Yaeya could acquire his spellcasting abilities through their life contract. This included the all-important illusion clone. Matthew couldn't help but smile. Just like he could send his illusion clone out for adventures and battles, Yaeya could now do the same. With this in mind, Matthew waved at the now larger Yaeya and whispered in her ear, "Try casting illusion clone." Even though Yaeya hadn't fully grasped the basics of arcane magic, she could instinctively cast the spell. 3 seconds later, 2 Yaeyas were staring wide-eyed at each other. X2. The little one curiously examined her identical clone, glancing left and right. Licking his lips with envy, Matthew looked at the night sky outside and led Yaeya out. Matthew went straight to find butler Ralph, who was sweating profusely as he practiced his martial skills. Noticing Matthew's arrival, the sharp-minded Ralph immediately stopped what he was doing. If it wasn't for something of great importance, the Lord wouldn't disrupt his usual schedule. If it wasn't a problem in Troll Valley, then it must be an issue with Adam Smith. Pleased with Ralph's keen instincts, Matthew glanced at the battle-hardened veteran feet on Ralph's stat panel, then spoke directly. Adam Smith's group is about to encounter danger. We need to gather our forces and head out to support them. Nodding silently, Butler Ralph hesitated for a moment before decisively saying, "Then we should issue an emergency task and mobilize the adventurers." Giving Ralph an approving look, Matthew nodded without hesitation and said expectantly, "After all, soldiers are raised for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Offer the adventurers a highly paid escort mission. If they're going to risk their lives, they might as well do it for me." Glancing subtly at the Lord, Ralph then turned and left, heading toward the adventurers' hall. The Lord has clearly been planning all along, nurturing our own strength while using adventurers to advance his cause. Half an hour later, in the adventurers' halls of Bay Village, the logging camp and Troll Valley camp, a task appeared that shocked all adventurers. Emergency. 100,000 gold bounty. All adventurers are eligible to join. Mission details: territory defense mission. Mission objective: join the Special Operations Unit, follow combat orders, and defeat the enemy. Mission duration: 10 days. Mission reward: all adventurers who join the Special Operations Unit, follow combat orders, and engage the enemy will receive 100 gold coins and 10 contribution points. Additional reward: kill enemies to earn corresponding gold and contribution points. Note: any adventurer who does not accept the mission is prohibited from leaving the camp for 10 days. Violators will forfeit all contribution points. This announcement immediately caught the interest and attention of all the adventurers. The adventurers quickly pieced it together. Bay territory is under attack. The Lord is really rich. Generous is more like it. Throwing out 100,000 gold coins, my goodness. What kind of enemy could it be? Trolls from deep within the dark forest? No way, the trolls on the outskirts have mostly been cleared out. You'd have to go 10 kilometers to either side to find more trolls. Troll Valley only has 2 entrances, and the deeper one is already being monitored. Since adventurers are banned from going out, it's likely that the enemy is human. Does that mean it's a bandit group? Are you kidding? What bandit group has that kind of strength? So, who is it then? Doesn't matter who it is, I'm definitely taking this mission. One job could cover half a year's income. Exactly, we can't let Alice's team snatch up all the good stuff. I'm signing up too. It's rare to find such a generous territory, and I'm going to help defend it at all costs. That's right, cutting off our income is like killing our parents, let's fight them. For various reasons, the adventurers became highly enthusiastic and rushed to sign up. The vast majority of adventurers were more than willing to fight for Bay territory. The generous rewards were secondary. Mostly, they couldn't stand the idea of someone attacking their territory. That's not okay. An excited butler Ralph quickly reported this heartening news to Matthew. Matthew wasn't surprised and smiled brightly before turning to say, "We have 3 days. Notify all non-combat personnel in the arms factories to start working in shifts. Producing military supplies at full capacity. Make sure they get plenty of overtime pay. Also, inform everyone and make this situation widely known. Everyone doing their part is the best support for the territory." Seeing the confident smile on Matthew's face, Butler Ralph and Angela exchanged glances, both seeing unparalleled confidence and determination in each other's eyes. They would fully support the Lord in defeating any invaders, sparing no effort to defend the territory. Since the battle was inevitable, they would go all out. Soon, the scouts received their orders and began posting announcements in every public bulletin board around town. They also called out loudly, "The emergency order has been announced. Everyone can follow the battle updates on the daily bulletin. Do not panic. Do your job well and we will surely win." The clear voice spread throughout Bay territory. After the initial commotion, everyone in Bay territory quickly settled down. So what if it's a fight? We're going to win anyway. Chapter 125. Not leaving. Chapter 125. Not leaving. Time flew by, and the stars shifted. Early the next morning, just as dawn broke, golden sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting brilliant rays. The morning chill had not yet fully dissipated when the Thorn caravan set off. Most people in the convoy had no inkling of the danger ahead, and were instead filled with more anticipation and longing for their arrival in Bay territory. Having only fallen asleep late in the night, Adam Smith was carefully studying the map, his bloodshot eyes feeling a bit sore. He blinked hard and sighed deeply before saying, "Arcanist, the enemy is most likely to launch an attack this afternoon or evening, probably near the ruins of Sweetwater Town." Sweetwater Town. The place where fate was changed. Matthew couldn't help but recall the second, seemingly random choice of fate he had made. In hindsight, if he hadn't left the vicinity of Sweetwater Town in time back then, he might have faced enormous danger. He wondered what the current situation was in Sweetwater Town. A town that once held tens of thousands of people, reduced to ruins in just moments, would that attract adventurers to explore? The answer was most likely yes. But strangely, there hadn't been any news from there, which was odd. Seeing Adam Smith's questioning gaze, Matthew focused on his status panel. Bloodshed, disaster. No change. It was clear that the enemy hadn't deviated from their original plan. Matthew followed Adam Smith's lead and said, "In that case, let's stick to the plan." Thinking of the established plan, Adam Smith nodded solemnly, rubbed his face hard, and immediately fell asleep. He couldn't go out looking like this, or someone might sense something was amiss. Matthew looked at the sky, a clear blue without a cloud in sight, a perfect day for travel. What a pity! The Thorn caravan had traveled this route many times before, so even without Adam Smith's direction, everything ran smoothly. As the caravan moved farther away, several pairs of eyes withdrew, vanishing into the alleyways of the town. Before long, people began leaving from the other gates of the town, disappearing into the misty marsh. After some twists and turns, they overtook the Thorn caravan via another route and met up with their waiting allies. A hulking figure sat astride a warhorse. Clad in gleaming armor, faintly glowing with magical light, it was a full set of enchanted armor. He rode a six-legged warhorse, its exterior covered in dark green scales, its head twisting restlessly. The horse's maw, full of sharp teeth, exhaled white vapor, and its blood-red eyes rolled constantly, staring greedily and bloodthirstily at the approaching scout. On the man's back was a pitch-black great axe, emanating a chilling aura. The axe's blood-stained blade pulsed with a dark red aura. It was an extraordinary enchanted weapon. Under the steel helmet, a scarred face gradually came into view in the sunlight, revealing a visage marred by burn scars. Bloodhand Karn. The scars on his face were a keepsake from Matthew. Karn had had the opportunity to heal them, but he chose to keep them as a reminder until he exacted his revenge. He looked in the direction of the approaching Thorn caravan, his grey-brown eyes blazing with endless fury. He longed for revenge. Against Matthew, against his soldiers, against every single person in Bay Village. But for the sake of better revenge, after receiving the intel, he made a retreating gesture. Hundreds of cavalry followed him as they disappeared into the misty marsh. They waited for the Thorn caravan to deliver itself into their hands. Strangely, they moved effortlessly through the soft, soggy marsh. Matthew had no idea that such a huge surprise was waiting for him. But even if he knew, it wouldn't change his upcoming decisions. He was carefully observing each soldier's luck value, recording their strength, and accumulating more data. He couldn't rely solely on the experience gained from fate's choices. Even if one day he lost the system's abilities, Matthew would continue to grow on his own. The morning passed uneventfully. When Adam Smith awoke midway, he felt an unusual sense of pressure. It was as if deadly enemies lurked somewhere in the flat expanse of the misty marsh. Watching the carefree pushcart workers, Adam Smith pulled a small bottle of blue potion from his coat and downed it in one gulp. Clarity Potion. A mid-level potion that helps clear the mind and regulate emotions, used by spellcasters for spell research and alchemists before crafting magic items. Market value, 50 gold coins. The bitter potion flowed down his throat into his stomach, quickly transforming into a pool of gentle water that poured into his chaotic thoughts. It washed away his worries and soothed his mind. In the past, Adam Smith wouldn't have wasted alchemical potions just to stay alert. That would have been burning money. But now he had no choice but to stay sharp. If he could survive this ordeal, he would finally have a solid foothold in the circle of high-level merchants in Blood Moon City. Not leaving the carriage, he called for his personal guard captain, being exceedingly cautious. He was also afraid of an assassination attempt that would throw the caravan into chaos, exposing the presence of the Arcanist. Tell all the guards to remain vigilant from now on. Also, send a team to the back of the convoy to make sure no one leaves markers. Even though they knew the enemy would attack, preparations still had to be made. Any overlooked detail could bring fatal danger. Fortunately, Adam Smith had anticipated this. From the moment he decided to enter the upper echelon of the merchant world, he had been ready to fight for it personally. Gold never comes without the scent of blood. The figure at the back of the convoy had a look of concern in her eyes. She bit her lip, but in the end didn't make a move. Now was not the right time. The sun climbed high, it was noon. The Thorn caravan arrived in front of a hill, where the pits from their last trip were still visible. Licking his lips, Adam Smith gave a clear order. Everyone else rest and prepare lunch. As he spoke, Adam Smith approached the lead group of pushcart workers, saying calmly and quietly, "The place is here, begin." The pushcart workers, already prepared, nodded silently and pushed the last few carts up the hill. Unlike usual, they didn't take out cooking supplies, but instead dismantled the carts to reveal bundles of treated black wood. The rest of the convoy looked on in confusion, as they silently watched the workers take out digging tools and begin carving a circular trench around the middle of the hill. Adam Smith's mind was somewhat blank, his thoughts filled with Matthew's words. Leave. Why would we leave? We're staying right here, we're not leaving. Chapter 126, Building High Walls. Chapter 126, Building High Walls. Thud. 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 Wooden stakes were driven forcefully into the ground. The tall and burly clay golem slowly lowered its fist, stepped to the right, and hammered down on the next wooden stake with great force. Feeling the faint tremors from the ground, everyone's gaze was unconsciously fixated in a daze. For most of them, it was the first time seeing the clay golem perform actions other than walking. The display of raw power from the massive clay golem left everyone in shock and stirred some mixed feelings in their hearts. While everyone was focused on the clay golem building the wooden walls, lunch was being prepared and distributed to the group. Unconsciously, they all stopped wondering, why were they building wooden walls here? While everyone was eating, Matthew had already controlled the clay golem to drive the first row of 2-meter-long black wooden beams into the trench. Soon, the second group, who had been ready for some time, began moving the 30-plus carriages into the enclosure. The carriages entered the walled area, blocking everyone's view. The carriage doors opened, and hundreds of lively figures jumped out. All of them were cloaked, and the sunlight made them slightly uncomfortable. 500 kobolds. They had been teleported here along with Matthew. Due to their small size, 20 carriages were enough to hold them all. The large and imposing Goldfang was the last to step out. His vertical pupils scanned the kobolds, and at his mere glance, the previously restless kobolds immediately quieted down. Without waiting for Goldfang's command, the kobolds lined up to retrieve various tools from the carriages. Then they demonstrated an astonishing level of discipline. Under the leadership of larger kobolds, they split into small teams and got to work under Goldfang's command. Despite their small stature, the kobolds moved swiftly, wielding hammers and shovels with impressive speed. In just over 10 minutes, the kobolds had dug a deep trench behind the walls. Then they quickly excavated a series of deep pits, extracting large amounts of dirt and piling it up behind the wooden walls. The dirt piled higher and higher, and the pits connected to form underground tunnels. Seeing the plan steadily advancing, Matthew slowly opened the door of the carriage and stepped out calmly. His movements seemed to trigger a reaction, as the barbarian soldiers who had been resting in the nearby carriages also stepped out. The fully armored barbarian soldiers, standing in the sunlight, exuded an overwhelming presence. Those who had just finished eating curiously looked over. None of them had even noticed when these barbarian soldiers and the mysterious Arcanist had joined the caravan. Adam Smith stepped forward and called out in a clear, straightforward voice, "Attention everyone, we are now hiring. The wages are the same as in Bay Territory, so if you're interested, you can sign up now. Additionally, due to the heavy workload this time, there's an extra 50% pay bonus for all participants." As he spoke, the caravan's guards deftly pulled out several recruitment boards. Some adventurers, still eating, glanced curiously at the busy clay golems and finally understood. Bay Territory is planning to build a camp here. I think so. This spot is exactly a day's journey from Bay Territory. Building a camp here would eliminate a lot of dangers. Exactly. Don't be fooled by the calm, misty marsh. Once night falls, those fishmen will swarm in droves. I've experienced that before, and I have no desire to go through it again. The caravan came well prepared. A lot of those carriages were loaded with construction materials. Of course they are recruiting workers. This is the Lord's favorite thing to do. Haha, didn't we all get recruited once before? With Bay Territory's construction speed, this won't take long. We'll probably reach Bay Village by tomorrow. Hearing the adventurers' conversation, the pushcart workers and refugees finally realized what was going on. They had seen the dangers of the wilderness at night firsthand, with many having narrowly escaped death. They quickly struck up conversations with the adventurers, asking about Bay Territory and the current hiring situation. When they heard that the average wage in Bay Territory was 20 copper coins a day, most were tempted. They also learned that after a month of working as a commoner in Bay Territory, one could earn a contribution point. With 100 contribution points, they could get a house to live in for free, and most people started making moves. Lastly, they were told that those who performed well on the job could apply for the reservist soldier exam. If they passed the exam and became reservist soldiers, they would earn 10 silver coins a month. Everyone rushed forward at once, but quickly lined up obediently under the guards, scolding, to sign up. After all, if you didn't follow the rules, you wouldn't get a chance. No one dared to act out. The guards, well versed in recruitment, quickly registered everyone. Seeing how obedient they were, and with no sign of the expected enemy attack, Adam Smith signaled to Captain Mellon with a glance, and escorted by 4 clay golems, left Matthew's side and approached the group. For this camp construction, you'll only need to do the most basic tasks. Consider it an early introduction to life in Bay territory, and to ensure everyone has the strength to work, dinner will include meat for all. Hearing that there would be actual meat to eat, rather than just the smell of it. All the refugees' eyes lit up, and they began excitedly discussing it. Adam Smith didn't interrupt their discussions, simply smiling as he watched them. Once they quieted down on their own, he continued, "Starting now, follow orders and work hard. Those who work diligently will be rewarded, and those who slack off won't get any meat tonight." Upon hearing this, everyone's faces lit up with excitement, and they eagerly shouted, "Rest assured, Adam Smith. We'll work hard and make sure no one slacks off." Riding this wave of enthusiasm, Adam Smith sent them off to work immediately. The first task was to clear the reeds surrounding the hill. Adam Smith watched them closely and then glanced at Matthew as he approached, asking him, "Which one is the spy? Should we root them out?" Matthew, looking at the obvious hints, replied calmly, "Why would we root them out? Without them, we'd have fewer people to do the work. Besides, if they don't send word of my presence here, how would the enemy know where to attack?" As he spoke, Matthew waved his hand toward the sky. Accompanied by a distant screech, Yaya, now with wings spanning over 2 meters, descended in a spiral. Under countless astonished gazes, she landed gracefully. The star of the show had arrived. Chapter 127. No One Left Alive. Chapter 127. No one left alive. An invisible aura of authority blanketed everyone at the scene. Many trembled in fear, while the bolder ones sneaked glances. To those who saw Yaya for the first time, her silver-white scales covering her entire body made her both beautiful and terrifying. All the new adventurers widened their eyes, not wanting to miss any detail of Yaya's majestic and imposing appearance. Even though they had heard from their companions that the Lord had a dragon, they had subconsciously assumed it was just boasting. It wasn't until Yaya spiraled down and gracefully perched on the top of the carriage, her long tail coiling around and her wide wings folding in, that they finally exhaled, realizing their backs were drenched in cold sweat. The adventurers who had seen Yaya before took great pride in explaining to the startled newcomers, "What are you panicking about? Yaya won't eat you, she's actually very friendly. Yeah, but don't forget, Yaya's combat power is immense. She once easily took down over 10 trolls in a single battle. That's right. First, she circled in the sky and then dove down with incredible force. Her breath is even more terrifying. She once banished a high-level professional into a time rift with it. That was a mysterious and powerful arcanist, so don't provoke him. I heard he wiped out 200 or 300 trolls in Troll Valley by himself. Yes, an entire forest was burned down by his fireball spells, and the whole sky was covered in thick smoke. Looks like the goods we're escorting must be really important. I'd say so too. Did you see those barbarian soldiers? These guys went on boasting, leaving the new adventurers completely stunned. Seeing this, Matthew thought he might need to establish a strategic disinformation department. Keeping the enemy uncertain of the truth was something Matthew always focused on. Seeing the shock and confusion on the faces of the pushcart workers and refugees, Matthew silently gave Yaya, perched above, a mental thumbs up. Yaya is amazing. She's already mastered controlling her illusion clone perfectly. Indeed, the Yaya before them was the illusion clone that had flown all the way from Bay territory. The little one had flown this long distance for the first time and was in a great mood, happily responding in Matthew's mind. Rebecca also said the same thing. Her bright eyes gleamed as she thought of getting Rebecca to return soon. After all, without her food-loving companion, eating too much alone gave her a bit of guilt. That's why Yaya was so clever. Steering the conversation towards Rebecca, she glanced cautiously at her papa and then hesitantly added, "She went to her master yesterday. It seems she's in trouble, Rebecca." Trouble? Matthew's mind flashed with the image of a mischievous, cute figure, and he suddenly recalled. No wonder Yaya is free today. Otherwise, they'd both be out on the streets hunting for food after training. Wait, Rebecca's master is a druid, isn't he? To cultivate magic yams and improve rice and wheat varieties, a druid would be essential. Trouble. That's the last thing I'm afraid of. Matthew still remembered that Rebecca's luck value had reached +3 yesterday. In the short term, her luck wouldn't fluctuate too much. For now, he focused his attention back on the upcoming battle. Pfizer Caravan, it seems, were quite faded. I really want to know if the Bloodhen slaver group I dealt with last time was something you orchestrated, or if it was just fate clashing into me. Matthew couldn't help but connect the dots between the Pfizer Caravan, the Bloodhen slaver group, the ambush when he crossed over, and the assassination attempts from his youth. One event could be coincidence, but too many coincidences meant it was inevitable. Matthew assessed the forces at his disposal, fully determined to win this upcoming battle. After this battle, Bay territory would enter a precious period of peaceful development. The pushcart workers and refugees were swiftly clearing the reeds at the foot of the hill. Meanwhile, the caravan guards, led by Adam Smith, were busy moving the carriages into the walled enclosure. The walls were rising higher and higher, gradually blocking everyone's view, hiding what lay beyond their curiosity. Time passed little by little. The sun began to sink in the sky. The sunset's glow bathed the horizon in red. The heat in the marsh gradually subsided. One by one, fishermen began poking their heads out of their muddy nests. Their bulging eyes scanned their surroundings as they searched for anything edible. Soon they caught the scent of food. With a series of gurgling cries, they began splashing through the mud. But before they could get close, several sharp arrows flew in from afar, skewering several fishermen. The ones not killed immediately let out horrific screams, and the thick scent of blood spread through the marsh. Blood in the marsh stirred unrest. What had once been a peaceful scene in the misty marsh quickly turned chaotic as various creatures, drawn by the scent of blood, emerged from hiding. The fishmen, now numerous, quickly descended into chaos, and their violent fighting spread further and further. Glancing at the distant chaos, Bloodhenkarn stroked the metal handle of his axe, waiting for the bloodthirsty creatures to gather, while saying in a raspy, low voice, "The effect of Formula 14 is decent, but it only works on mid-tier and below magic creatures. It's not as effective on the fishmen. Their intelligence may be low, but they're still intelligent." That concludes the experiment log for Formula 14. After finishing his report, Bloodhenkarn tore open the communication scroll in his hand. The gloom in his eyes disappeared, replaced by a murderous intent that flared like fire. The fierce aura of a high-level professional drew the attention of the surrounding cavalry. A cloaked figure approached, took one look at the ready-to-strike Bloodhenkarn, and lowered his head slightly, speaking in a quiet voice. "The Thorn caravan didn't come. They stayed in the same spot as at noon. However, the scouts have reported seeing a spellcaster and a dragon among them. Additionally, there are 50 fully armored soldiers hidden in the last group of carriages." Hearing the detailed report, Karn didn't grow angry. Instead, he glanced back at the ruins of Sweetwater Town in the distance, and said calmly, "It seems either they've discovered us and are trying to lure us in, or they've changed their plans and are ramping up development to transport more supplies and people. Since they're not coming, notify the others to attack directly. If they want the maximum benefit, then let's strike. No prisoners, leave no one alive." Chapter 128, Bandits and Nobles. Chapter 128. Bandits and Nobles. Horrell was a bandit, but he was also a noble's guard. Most of the time, he could easily switch between these two identities. Of course, Horrell wasn't one of those bloodthirsty killers who didn't blink at taking lives. The orders they received from above were usually just to stand in line and charge forward a few times during the battle. As long as the other side surrendered, they wouldn't go overboard with killing. After all, they wouldn't be rewarded with more than a few silver coins anyway. This time, though, Horrell had a gut feeling that something was off. First, they had waited in the mosquito-infested reed beds for 2 or 3 hours, with no sight of their target, and lost weight in the process. Feeling a sharp sting on his neck, Horrell quickly slapped it. With a soft splat, he winced, looking at the blood on his fingertips, and cursed under his breath. "Damn place, gonna get sucked dry sooner or later. Quiet, or you'll catch a whipping later." His companion quickly pulled him aside, nervously scanning the surroundings. After seeing the others scratching and swatting at insects too, he relaxed slightly but still shot Horrell an annoyed look, muttering, "This time is different from the others. Our opponent isn't easy." Nodding obediently, Horrell knew exactly who their target was this time. The Thorn caravan's recent activities had caused quite a stir in Blood Moon City. Just as the two were about to continue their conversation, a loud call rang out. "Everyone gather up, rest for 20 minutes, and then we move out." The bewildered bandits emerged from the reed beds. Many grumbled about waiting for hours in the sweltering sun, being bitten by mosquitoes, and still not seeing their target. They could have just called it a failed mission and moved on. But now, they had to set out again. Tired and frustrated, they couldn't help but complain a little. Still, their complaints remained just words. They wouldn't dare disobey orders from above. After all, bandits were still bandits. As dusk fell, Adam Smith, who had been working hard all afternoon, exhaled deeply. Looking at the nearly finished wooden walls, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. He was thankful he had communicated with the Lord, rather than making decisions on his own. Even though every time he returned to Bay territory, he saw rapid progress, he still hadn't fully grasped the speed of its construction. Until now, in just one afternoon, 50 barbarian soldiers, 500 kobolds, and 20 clay golems. In just 4 hours, they had built a 400-meter-long, 4-meter-high, and 2-meter-thick wooden wall. At each of the 4 corners, they had constructed 6-meter-high watchtowers. Once 8 crossbows were mounted on the towers, a genuine sense of security washed over Adam Smith. He instinctively lowered his head and carefully observed the kobolds scurrying through the trenches, feeling an overwhelming sense of amazement. To think someone could control kobolds to work so effectively and train them so well, only the Lord could achieve that. The future certainly looked bright. Seeing the outer defenses nearly complete, Matthew nodded at Adam Smith, signaling him to move everyone into the camp. The refugees were the first to enter. Kobolds carrying tools poked their heads out of the underground tunnels, only to quickly retreat back inside. The sight before them left the refugees deeply shocked. Before they could fully process what they were seeing, Captain Melon called out, "Move the carriages to their designated camp spots, pitch your tents in the marked areas. Don't worry about the kobolds. They obey the Lord's commands and are loyal, trustworthy servants of Yea. In fact, once you spend enough time around them, you'll see how obedient they really are. But remember, don't try to bully them, or you'll lose your chance to join Bay territory." As Captain Melon gave instructions and the refugees watched the hardworking kobolds, they were filled with awe. They couldn't help but feel a deep respect for the mysterious lord they had never met. Power and mystery were the best tools for a lord to command his people. Carriages were soon moved to the cleared flat ground. After nearly 10 days of training and 2 days of practice, the refugees quickly got to work. They started by taking insect repellent powder from the carriages, sprinkling it around the areas where the tents would be set up, and clearing out any remaining weeds. Tents were swiftly erected, soon filling the entire inner slope of the hill. Once all the carriages had been brought inside the camp, the adventurers on sentry duty outside were also called back. But just as this was happening, the sound of fierce shouting and battle cries erupted from the distance. A signal flare shot up into the sky, bursting into a brilliant light. It was the emergency signal Adam Smith had given to the adventurers. Matthew turned his head toward the eastern reeds, where nearly 1,000 enemies were charging out. Matthew instantly recognized them as enemies because they were chasing down the adventurers. Fortunately, these adventurers were experienced and had already begun retreating before the attackers got close. Clearly, their battles with trolls in the dark forest had sharpened their instincts. This allowed them to detect the enemy early and retreat in time. Standing on the wall, Adam Smith saw the approaching enemies and instead of panicking, surprisingly relaxed, even cursing angrily. "Foolish dogs who don't know what they're up against, daring to make a move against us." Venting his frustration briefly, Adam Smith quickly regained his composure and began organizing the defense. "Inform all refugees to stay inside their tents and not come out unless we issue a new command. Anyone who disobeys will be killed on sight. Get the pushcart workers to unload carriages 20 to 40 and distribute equipment to the trained individuals. Quickly form a defense team. Assign 4 soldiers to each watchtower and ensure they bring plenty of crossbow bolts. Keep watch on the other 3 sides for any suspicious activity. Tell the returning adventurers to focus on defending the other 3 walls. We'll handle the frontal assault ourselves. Announce an emergency reward, 1 gold coin for every enemy killed." Orders were quickly dispatched, and the experienced Thorn Caravan members sprang into action. The initial chaos within the camp began to settle, as a sense of calm took hold under the leadership, with only a trace of anxiety lingering. Just as Adam Smith was directing soldiers to transport defensive supplies, 3 or 4 shadowy figures, as swift as lightning, closed in on him. Their weapons gleamed with a cold light, bringing deadly intent. Another decapitation attempt. Announcement. A big thank you to Hawaii661 and Connor for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 129. Experienced Enemies. Chapter 129. Experienced Enemies. The moment Adam Smith was attacked, the 4 burly clay golems stepped in front of him. They raised their fists, letting the weapons strike their bodies, sparks flying, without hesitation trading blow for blow. This was the golem's combat style. However, the attackers were prepared for the clay golems. One of them pulled out a scroll, emitting a strong magical glow from his pocket, and skillfully tore it open. 5th circle spell, Mass Slow. Even the clay golems, which had decent magic resistance, were affected by the Mass Slow spell. Their previously agile movements became sluggish, like snails. The other attackers deftly avoided the golem's slow strikes, grinning savagely as they stabbed Adam Smith. 4 or 5 sharp daggers pierced through Adam Smith, leaving him riddled with wounds. The high bounty for his assassination was what drove these attackers to risk it all. But instead of showing any pain, Adam Smith grinned back at them. His entire body began to shatter into pieces. Intense flames roared down from the sky. With a loud explosion, the spot where Adam Smith had stood was instantly engulfed in rolling flames. The attackers, unable to escape in time, only had a moment to display fear before they were consumed by the destructive power of the fireball spell. The broken remains of 5 assassins were revealed as the smoke cleared. Adam Smith has been attacked. Nobody move. The panicked guards were about to rush over when Captain Melon shouted at the top of his lungs, "Adam Smith is fine." "Don't panic." As he spoke, Captain Melon opened the nearby carriage door, revealing a smirking Adam Smith inside. Seeing that Adam Smith was unharmed, everyone in the camp breathed a sigh of relief, though they still felt a lingering fear. Adam Smith's importance couldn't be overstated. The Thorn Caravan's operations relied on his leadership. If he had been seriously injured or killed, the camp's defensive capabilities would have dropped by at least 30%. Adam Smith stood up, his face serious as he addressed everyone. "We've been attacked. These are ruthless killers, and everyone needs to stay alert. If you fall into their hands, death will be the best thing you could hope for. All soldiers prepare for battle. All refugees get into the tents as quickly as possible. Mount the crossbows on the walls. They dared to attack me. Let's knock their teeth out." Now fully awake, the soldiers immediately ordered the refugees to return to their tents. They kept a vigilant eye on everyone, knowing that the attack on Adam Smith right under their noses was a slap in the face to all the guards. With urgency, they quickly forced all the refugees into their tents. Then, filled with anger, they turned their attention to the oncoming enemy. As the soldiers got into formation, more adventurers safely returned to the camp. Watching the enemy get closer, Adam Smith couldn't help but walk toward Matthew's carriage. This time, not only were the 4 clay golems standing by his side, but also more than 10 professional guards. Inside the tents, a figure shuddered as they stared at the charred corpses on the ground, fear gripping their heart. She recalled the swiftness and devastating power of the fireball spell, and was grateful for her hesitation earlier. So this is the power of an arcanist. Terrifying. Ding, you have killed 5th level assassins X5, gaining 250 experience points and 1 skill point. Spending 100 gold coins to get 250 experience points and 1 skill point was well worth it. And eliminating these enemies wasn't the only benefit Matthew reaped. Cole deceased. Profession 5th level assassin. Identity junior assassin of the Assassin's Guild, Farcico Rogue Knight. The other 4 assassins were also part of the Assassin's Guild, just like the deceased Cole. This annoyed Matthew quite a bit. Normally, the Assassin's Guild in the Netheril Empire was limited to providing information or acting as intermediaries. Assassinating commoners or professionals was one thing, but assassinating those with noble ties was absolutely forbidden. Most nobles in the Netheril Empire were spellcasters, with formidable strength, and they wouldn't tolerate reckless assassinations. No lord or noble would ever allow the Assassin's Guild to kill nobility or those associated with them. Mishandling such situations could cause terrible disasters. Just like years ago, when the first king of the Netheril Empire initiated a bloody era of assassinations to consolidate power from other regions. In the end, he succeeded. The Netheril Empire became a united entity. But he also failed as he was killed in an assassination, and the royal family suffered immense losses. This led to the rise of the spellcaster's power. Now, the fact that the Assassin's Guild dared to act like this made Matthew wonder if they had simply grown bolder from a lack of punishment over time, or if they had been taken over by the enemy. It seems the enemy's forces are quite formidable. Matthew quickly realized that the enemy might have infiltrated Bay territory by planting spies among the settlers. There was no need to question it, the answer was obvious. He reflected on his own recent complacency. Everything in Bay territory had been progressing so smoothly that he had let his guard down. Grounding himself again, Matthew couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. His impact on the territory's development was beyond ordinary expectations. Many of his hidden secrets kept prying eyes at bay. However, he couldn't allow this infiltration to continue unchecked. While it was impossible to completely block out spies, he could at least make it cost them more dearly. Watching Adam Smith approach, Matthew's gaze shifted to the adventurers trailing behind him. 4 or 5 of them carried a distinct aura of hostility, sneaking glances at Matthew's direction. Matthew didn't act immediately, he was giving them a chance to perform. Yaya, who had been circling in the air, landed beside him, bringing the latest information on the enemy. The enemy's numbers total around 500, including 200 professionals, with a decent level of coordination. Matthew relayed this information to Adam Smith, whose face paled as he quickly calculated their own forces. We have 50 personal guards with an average level of 4. With Captain Melon at level 10, 150 caravan guards with an average level of 2, 500 trained pushcart workers, of which only about 80 are professionals. Fortunately, they can all use bows and arrows, and with the camp walls, they should be able to defend. There are 400 adventurers, though their strength varies, and they may not be entirely reliable. We can only have them help defend the flanks. The Arcanist is powerful, but even if he goes all out, he could only deal with a couple hundred enemies, so we'll need to save him for crucial moments. The 20 clay golems and 50 barbarian soldiers are key. Their strength and defensive abilities are critical to holding off the enemy attack. We still don't know how many enemies there are. Is this the Lord's test for us? Phew. ambitious Adam Smith wasn't content with just being a merchant. Controlling power and showcasing ability, that was his true goal. Chapter 130. The battle begins. Chapter 130. The battle begins. Matthew saw Adam Smith's seriousness, and as someone who enjoyed nurturing his own talent, he was willing to give this shrewd and capable businessman a chance. Adam Smith truly exhibited intelligence. In this world, strength and ability may not represent everything, but they are the foundation of everything. Adam Smith's talent was not particularly outstanding. According to normal development, even if he invested a considerable amount of funds and resources, there was only a small chance that he could break through to become a high-tier professional. However, Matthew was quite clear. In a few years, when the next wave of magic surges appears, almost everyone will have the talent to become a professional. The only things that can limit them will be inheritance and resources. Therefore, Matthew valued the abilities of talent more. Relying solely on fighting and killing would, at best, only make one a thug. Most barbarian soldiers, once equipped with enough resources and fine gear, could perform this task well. Independent talent, however, was what Matthew valued most. Talent like Steward Ralph, who could methodically handle the entire territory's development and internal affairs. Or like Angela, who could train soldiers, command battles, defend the territory, and solve military problems. If Adam Smith could develop a certain level of command ability, he wouldn't need to strategize far and wide. He only needed to command properly and handle the defense. The enemies approaching from afar were a suitable test for him. They had a certain level of discipline, and their coordination was fairly well practiced. Although over 1,000 of them attacked dozens of adventurers and didn't manage to capture a single one, which was embarrassing. Matthew still believed that these murder-hardened thugs had considerable combat power. To have gathered such a strong group of bandits. This battle is going to be tough. Horrell, who was approaching on foot from a distance, shared this thought. He was supposed to be the spearhead, pushing to surround the adventurers. He should have led the charge, torn apart the adventurers' scattered defenses, and surrounded the dozen or so adventurers, swallowing them whole. After that, having adventurer captives in hand would give them many more options. Whether to use psychological tactics to quickly lower the enemy's defensive morale, or to inflict torture and intimidation, wearing down their will to fight, either way, it would have provided great convenience for the next battle. But what happened? The long wait, the exhaustion from the journey, greatly drained their energy. Furthermore, they had looked down on these adventurers recruited by the Thorn Chamber of Commerce from the beginning, so they hadn't given their full effort. But the latter showed an extraordinary level of vigilance. They used a silent spell scroll for a surprise attack, and when they approached within about 30 meters, they were detected. Horrell had thought, these adventurers, after discovering them, would have the same wishful thinking as others, or issue a warning, thereby losing their last chance to escape. But reality gave him a cold slap in the face. As soon as the adventurers saw them, they not only turned and ran, but they ran incredibly fast. Horrell even saw with his own eyes. The leading adventurer didn't hesitate to tear open a magic scroll, summoning a gust of wind that accelerated them, helping a dozen adventurers escape from their death trap. You fools, I told you not to underestimate the enemy, and now they've escaped. Now prepare for an assault. Everyone, rest for 30 minutes and grab your round shields. We only need to block 5 rounds of arrows at most, and then we can rush forward. Don't tell me you've run out of strength to climb a wooden fence. The commander's roar was clearly heard by everyone, and every bandit's face showed anger. Because they knew the enemy wasn't simple, and people were going to die in the next battle. Horrell stopped his pursuit, quickly took stock of his men, and led them to sit down cross-legged, pulling out dried meat from his pack and slowly chewing it. The rest time passed quickly. They only have a little over 500 professionals, and not a single high-tier professional among them. We will definitely win. Kill everyone who dares to resist. We'll make at least tens of thousands of gold coins on this trip, building a row of wooden fences, thinking it could stop our black bandit group. What a joke! Everyone, charge with me. The loud battle cries rang in every bandit's ears. A tall and burly high-tier warrior, raising his greatsword, led the charge. Kill, charge! The bandits, eager to vent their frustration and bloodlust, raised their shields and howled as they followed. Their vast combat experience, and their absolute trust in their leader's strength and judgment, convinced them that they would win once again. As the bandits drew closer and closer, the cart pushers standing on the walls felt uneasy and afraid. After all, they had only received a little over 10 days of training, and apart from the professionals, the others had never even seen blood. Facing the deafening battle cries of over 1,000 bandits, the fact that they hadn't turned and fled was already a result of Adam Smith's earlier rallying cry. Knowing that morale was about to collapse, Adam Smith decisively ordered, "Load the crossbows, fire." The taut bowstrings ripped through the air with a sharp bang. Every bolt, costing more than 10 silver coins and imbued with hope, flew out with a sharp whiz. With a piercing shriek, they shot toward the charging bandits. The 400-meter distance was covered in the blink of an eye. 7 or 8 bandits fell on the spot, the crossbow bolts tearing through their bodies like they were puncturing parchment. 3 bandits were killed instantly. They were the lucky ones. Several other bandits had their limbs shattered and lay on the ground, rolling and wailing in agony. Their wooden round shields had been completely useless. Touch them and you're crippled, collide with them and you're dead. The terrifying, destructive power of the crossbows was fully unleashed. Horal's heart trembled mid-charge. Unable to bear the sight of his comrades' gruesome fates, he sprinted forward recklessly. Adam Smith was overjoyed and shouted excitedly, "Just like that, reload quickly. Ready. Fire!" The bandits, who had advanced about 70 or 80 meters, once again faced a shower of crossbow bolts. Even though they had deliberately spread out, the dirt path was only so wide for fast movement. Another 5 or 6 bandits fell to the ground, screaming. Even though the crossbow volleys could only continue for 4 or 5 rounds, they had already put immense psychological pressure on the bandits. Dying without being able to fight back was a stifling, maddening experience for them. At the same time, watching the bandits charge and fall, the cart pushers who had been shaken earlier suddenly felt something different in their hearts. So these fierce bandits are just flesh and blood too. Seeing the change in the cart pushers' expressions, Adam Smith, pleased, shouted with renewed vigor, "Do you hear their screams? They bleed just like us, they get hurt just like us. If you don't want to die, you have to kill them. First row of archers, ready, fire." The arrows flew out sporadically and unevenly. Chapter 131. Inevitable Death. Chapter 131. Inevitable death. Everyone eventually dies, though no one ever thinks it comes too soon. Most of the cart pushers had little to no archery skills. Adam Smith didn't have high expectations for them either. Just pull the bow to its fullest and shoot the arrows. With enemies charging in densely, they were bound to hit something, just like the bandits before them. Although the scattered rain of arrows didn't maximize its killing potential, these were still military-grade weapons. The sharp and sturdy arrowheads fell and completed their mission. Over a dozen bandits screamed as they fell to the ground. Even though they raised their shields, the iron-forged arrowheads were strong enough to pierce through the wooden shields. Some bandits, even with arrows stuck in their bodies, continued to sprint forward. The bandits weren't stupid. The slower they ran, the more dangerous it became. Without caring about the killing effect, Adam Smith kept shouting, "First row fall back, second row step forward, draw, shoot." The first row of uneasy cart pushers retreated while the second row, visibly more relaxed, mimicked them, drawing their bows and shooting. After they shot their arrows, Adam Smith called the first row back up. He didn't care too much about the effectiveness of the shooting. He just wanted the cart pushers to see some blood. If they survived, they'd be seasoned soldiers in the next battle. Round after round of arrow volleys fell, and after only 4 volleys from each row, the bandits had already charged through. Even though the cart pushers' archery coordination was sloppy, nearly 2,000 arrows had been fired, striking the bandits solidly. The ferocious bandits suffered heavy losses. Over 50 bandits fell, and more than 70 were injured. Including the 5 volleys from the 28 crossbows, the bandits' combat power had been reduced by nearly 200. The remaining bandits, with bloodshot eyes, continued their charge. Without time to think, Adam Smith decisively issued the combat orders. Cart pushers, fall back, follow shooting instructions, shoot at an upward angle. The cart pushers, feeling like they were pardoned, quickly retreated from the walls. Shield bearers, spearmen, get on the walls. Clay golems, activate combat mode. As soon as the words were spoken, the numerous bandits reached the walls. Facing a 4-meter-tall wall, the bandits were stunned. They couldn't believe that earlier in the morning, when they passed by, this was just an unremarkable little hill. In just a few hours, a towering wall had sprung up. But that wasn't the full extent of their troubles. Except for the 50-meter slope connecting to the road, the other areas at the base of the hill were filled with soft, swampy mud. If someone stepped in, they'd likely sink in unless they quickly pulled themselves out. So the bandits could only attack from the front. Arrows continued to rain down, striking the bandits who were packed together, creating immense pressure on them. The cart pushers, who had retreated to the center of the hill, only needed to pull their bows and shoot at the designated angle. This made things easier for them, but constantly reminded the bandits. They had to attack quickly. Fortunately, the bandits weren't unprepared. Several rogue bandits pulled ropes with iron hooks from their packs, swung them twice, and tossed them upwards. The shiny and sturdy hooks caught on the edge of the wall, and the rogues quickly began climbing the ropes. As they climbed, they threw daggers or knives to prevent anyone from showing their head and cutting the ropes. The remaining bandits didn't stand idle either. furiously hacking away at the wooden barricades, trying to break them into pieces. Bang! 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 The sound of metal clashing stunned the bandits. The shocking force from the sword's impact made their wrists tingle with numbness. Upon closer inspection, they saw that their swords had barely left shallow cuts on the dark wooden wall. There wasn't even much splintering. This is ironwood. The entire wall is made of ironwood. Impossible. A single piece of ironwood, 5 fingers wide and 2 meters long, costs a whole gold coin. If the whole wall is ironwood, it must be worth tens of thousands of gold coins. I don't believe it either, but it's right in front of us now. Stop thinking about hacking it down, climb up the ropes. Hurry up and push forward. They're still shooting arrows from above. The bandits, though shocked by the Thorn merchant caravan's extravagance, grumbled as they prepared to climb. I'm beat. At that moment, a violent tremor came from the walls. Along with it came the piercing screams of their rogue companions and the faint sound of bones breaking. Bodies like ragdolls were flung down violently, landing heavily in front of them. The mangled corpses, twisted into horrifying shapes like broken pretzels, revealed the terrifying strength of the attackers. Almost all the rogues who had climbed up were thrown down in misery, with only a few of the stronger rogues barely hanging on as they struggled to survive. The other bandits were startled, and from the rear one of them spotted towering figures and shouted, "Clay golems." 20 of them, faced with death either by arrows or climbing, the bandits found themselves in a dire predicament. In the end, they couldn't bear being passively shot at, so they gritted their teeth and began climbing. The strongest bandit leader, Beverly, stepped up and showed his leadership. He grabbed a rope, braced himself against the wall, and hauled himself up with a powerful pull. As soon as he made it to the wall, a dull whooshing sound came straight at him, an enormous fist. The blow was massive and powerful. Beverly didn't take it head-on. He rolled on the ground, bringing his greatsword upward as he moved. Crack! Crack! Clay shards flew off as the massive clay golem's body was forced to retreat a step. Beverly pressed his advantage, slashing his greatsword, hitting the clay golem's leg. He crouched slightly to avoid a heavy strike from the golem and gathered his strength, gripping his sword with both hands, and stabbed toward the golem's chest. Bang! Crash! The thick and sturdy clay golem was actually pierced right through by him. Ignoring the severely damaged golem, which was still shakily raising its arms to try and grab him, crack! Beverly's sword struck the golem's neck, and with a powerful burst of force, he chopped its head off. The tall body fell heavily backward, collapsing into pieces with a loud crash. Beverly exhaled slightly but didn't continue charging. Instead, he held the line, waiting for his companions to climb up. Within a dozen breaths, 7 or 8 fearless bandits, with Beverly covering them, made it onto the wall. Soon, under Beverly's leadership, they pushed forward, forcing their way through the shield-bearing soldiers, carving out a foothold. Soldiers and bandits fell one after another, their blood soaking the ground and mixing with the stench of the foggy swamp. Death is fair. It descends swiftly and decisively. Chapter 132. Retreat. Chapter 132. Retreat. More and more bandits climbed onto the walls. The casualties among the defending soldiers continued to increase. Staring at the agile and powerful Beverly, Adam Smith roughly gauged his strength. Ordinary soldiers couldn't hold him back. If 2 more clay golems hadn't been sent in to block him, he would have broken through the defenses long ago. The situation quickly became critical. Adam Smith knew it was a crucial moment. He couldn't afford to hide his strength any longer, so he urgently mobilized 2 more clay golems and shouted loudly at Beelzebub, "Push him back!" Beelzebub, stationed on the hillside, had already charged down the moment the order was given. Accompanying him were 20 heavily armored barbarian soldiers. The barbarian soldiers had undergone significant changes after living in the Bay Territory for over a month. The weakness from months of migration had completely disappeared. They were eating meat every meal, getting full every time, gaining weight and muscle daily. Their weapons and equipment had been upgraded from simple tools to sophisticated gear. Each was now clad in full steel armor, and every step they took left deep footprints. Each one wielded a broad-backed iron machete, an iron round shield embedded in their left arms, a short sword at their waists, and wore face masks and collars. They were armed to the teeth. Their imposing figures created an overwhelming pressure on the bandits. Beverly suppressed his urge to launch an attack on the surroundings. Staring at the towering figure in front, he couldn't help but take a deep breath, cursing inwardly, "What the hell is the intelligence team doing?" Ever since he had taken on this mission and begun the ambush, nothing had gone smoothly. The adventurers were extremely vigilant, and the intimidatory massacre failed. The Thorn merchant caravan's camp actually carried crossbows, and the bandits lost significant combat power during the charge. The construction of the walls and the advantage of the terrain gave the cart pushers the courage to shoot back with arrows. The constant barrage of arrows kept chipping away at his forces. If it were just that, Beverly could bear it. He had been through many tough battles, and had even led troops to repel berserk orc attacks before. He had confidence that he could take down the cumbersome clay golems one by one, break through the shield-bearing soldiers' defenses, and get more bandits onto the walls to secure victory. But where the hell did these fully armed, massive barbarian soldiers come from? In the blink of an eye, the towering Beelzebub charged forward like a fierce tiger down the mountain, swiftly reaching Beverly, raising his giant axe and bringing it down with a powerful strike. The terrifying force made Beverly's pupils contract. Danger! Beverly didn't take the hit head-on. His rich combat experience allowed him to leap sideways to the left, avoiding Beelzebub's sharp attack. Before he even landed, Beverly had already turned his sword handle, stepping forward in one fluid motion to deliver a powerful slash. His movements were smooth, efficient, and skillful. Beelzebub, in the middle of his forward charge, astonishingly twisted his body to the side. Using his waist as a pivot, he swung his giant axe hard, cutting diagonally into Beverly's greatsword. Clang! Sparks flew in front of Beelzebub's eyes. He displayed incredible agility, using the recoil from the clash to cancel out his forward momentum and the stiffness from the turn, continuing to press in on Beverly. Beverly's wrist went numb from the impact, and he quickly retreated 2 steps, cursing inwardly, extraordinary strength. What the hell? Using his agility, Beverly nimbly maneuvered around Beelzebub, engaging him in a cat-and-mouse dance. However, the other bandits weren't so lucky. The bandits in the front couldn't dodge in time, and had no choice but to face the charging barbarian soldiers head-on. Bang! 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 Blood splattered. Bones snapped and tendons tore. The bandits who directly confronted the powerful barbarian soldiers screamed as they fell. The previously open breach was forcibly plugged by these barbarian soldiers, and the bandits who had just climbed up were stuck at the edge. The barbarian soldiers in front of them charged with shields raised and blades swinging. Although their movements weren't perfectly synchronized, their sheer strength and size made them terrifyingly effective. The bandits gritted their teeth and charged, swinging their blades in a preemptive attack. Strike first to gain the upper hand. However, their swords and knives only managed to scrape sparks off the thick armor of the barbarian soldiers. Even the attacks from 2 mid-tier professional warriors were blocked by the barbarian soldiers' shields, with sharp combat instincts. Their desperate assault was like waves crashing against a rock. While it made a lot of noise, it didn't move the rock an inch. A few knowledgeable bandits widened their eyes in panic and shouted, "Enchanted heavy armor." The defense of heavy armor was already formidable, but now it was fully enchanted. Terrifying. Who the hell are they? How are they so rich? Could this be a trap? There was no mention of us facing heavy infantry in the intelligence, and they are barbarians. Damn it. We can't break through. The barbarian soldiers, who had never had the advantage in equipment before, were now filled with morale and slashed relentlessly. Crack! The bandits, with their weak armor, couldn't withstand the relentless attacks, screaming as they fell. Out of the 30-some bandits who had climbed up, only a dozen remained in the blink of an eye. Seeing his comrades fall, Beverly's heart tightened. Although Beelzebub was only a mid-tier warrior, his formidable strength and unexpected defensive abilities had kept him firmly engaged. Now, Beverly couldn't break through the defenses. If this dragged on any longer, the casualties would only mount. He had no other choice. Gritting his teeth, Beverly swung his greatsword in a heavy strike, and as Beelzebub paused to defend, he dodged to the side and leaped down. Seeing Beverly jump down, the other bandits naturally lost the will to fight as well. Amid shouts of retreat, the bandits, blocked by the wall, turned and fled in frustration. Compared to their decisive and fierce assault, their retreat was much more chaotic. The ranks were disorganized as they ran, heads down. Even though the barbarian soldiers didn't pursue, the cart pushers, full of renewed spirit, ignored the pain in their arms and continued to shoot arrows. The scattered but dense rain of arrows left dozens more bandits behind. Only when the bandits were out of range of the military crossbows did Adam Smith's voice stop the shooting. Everyone looked at each other before erupting into cheers of joy. "We won, haha, we won. By the goddess, we survived. Phew, that scared me. My legs are shaking. My arms are so sore I think they're going to fall off. Don't just stand there. Clean up the battlefield quickly." Breathing a sigh of relief, Adam Smith wiped the sweat from his palms, looking at the bandits who had stopped just out of range, and shouted loudly, "Injured soldiers, raise your hands and take blood-restoring potions. Uninjured soldiers, clean up the battlefield. Move all the bodies from beneath the walls into a pit nearby and burn them. Everyone, drink a recovery potion." As he said this, Adam Smith couldn't help but feel the pain of countless gold coins slipping away from him. Heartache. Announcement: a big thank you to Vilified Fox for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 133, Night Raid. Chapter 133, Night Raid. Furiously tossing aside the now useless Hawkeye scroll, Beverly, filled with anger, glared at the distant hillside and roared, "This is a merchant caravan. A simple caravan with only 400 or 500 professionals. A caravan where only adventurers can fight. Clay golems, heavy crossbows, fully armed guards, heavily armored barbarian infantry. They're almost stronger than the elites of Blood Moon City. What the hell is railed up to?" How did he gather this intelligence? The rogue standing beside him trembled in fear. Afraid that with just one wrong move, Beverly might vent his anger by cutting him down with a single sword stroke. However, he was fortunate. Beverly thought he was still useful and coldly said to him, "Notify railed, gather the others. I want them here by dawn." Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, the rogue quickly nodded, mounted his horse and sped off. The reason Beverly hadn't used communication magic was to maintain secrecy. The Netheril Empire's patrols were always watching this area. Rubbing his slightly swollen wrist, Beverly circulated his combat energy, trying to cleanse and restore the area, accelerating his recovery as much as possible. He turned his head again, glaring at the small hill hundreds of meters away, whispering to himself, "Why is the Sir family investing so much strength and resources into the easternmost part of the eastern province? Could it be that they've really discovered that ruin? Impossible. No one but our family should know." Matthew had no idea that the high-tier warrior hundreds of meters away had mistaken him for a pawn sent by the Sir family to scout the way. He was currently listening to Adam Smith tally the casualties. 2 clay golems destroyed, 4 severely damaged, affecting their combat capabilities, 22 caravan guards killed, 6 seriously injured, but their conditions have stabilized. No other casualties. We killed a total of 472 enemies. No survivors. As he spoke those last 4 words, Adam Smith couldn't help but look up and sneak a glance at the Arcanist, recalling his cold command from earlier, "Leave none alive." With nearly 30 casualties and almost 500 enemies killed, even with the advantages of intelligence gaps and the power of gold, it was undeniable that Adam Smith's defensive arrangements and crisis management had been quite effective. Matthew nodded and said in a calm voice, "Well done. Share this news with everyone. However, the battle isn't over yet. Arrange for them to rest in shifts. Notify all the adventurers that their opportunity to make money has arrived. Announce the defend the territory task. Kill 1 bandit, earn 10 gold coins. The bandits that have already been killed will also be counted this way. Spread the word to every soldier and combatant." Adam Smith couldn't help but feel a jolt of realization at the Arcanist's command. It suddenly dawned on him. Up until now, he hadn't properly utilized the adventurers. Clearly, the earlier assassination attempt by the adventurers had made him somewhat wary. Is the Arcanist reminding me to make use of every available resource? Seeing that Adam Smith hadn't left, Matthew unconsciously rubbed his temples, mentally noting the identities of these bandits. Redwood Merchant Guild, Bacon family. Why that family? Even with his past memories, Matthew didn't know much about the Bacon family. It wasn't that the family was too mysterious. Because no matter how mysterious a family is, once they interact with players, sooner or later, all their secrets will be exposed. But this family had already vanished by the time the players rose to power. Matthew had encountered a quest related to the Bacon family in a vast underground ruin. Due to the high difficulty of the quest, and the fact that the rewards weren't particularly attractive, he had simply declined it. The only impression the Bacon family had left on Matthew was that they held certain secrets about that underground ruin, and were mortal enemies with the Pfizer Merchant Guild. Stroking his chin, a slight smile appeared on Matthew's lips as he muttered to himself, "So, even this little corner of the eastern province hides so many powerful forces." Looking at the crimson moonlight falling over the land, Matthew deliberately avoided gazing directly at the blood moon in the sky. That was a death wish. Just as he stepped out of his tent, he heard cheers of joy. As soon as they saw him appear, the entire camp fell silent. Matthew glanced at the gathered adventurers and in a calm and confident voice said, "You have 1 hour to prepare. Join me for an assault." The adventurers first tensed up, then their eyes widened and their minds buzzed. "We're going to fight alongside the Arcanist. Don't just stand there, get ready. Bring everything, this is our chance to make a fortune. He's really an Arcanist. Keep it down, the bandits might hear us." The adventurers excitedly discussed among themselves, and different adventurer squads were already gearing up. The commotion from the camp didn't go unnoticed by the bandits. Beverly cautiously watched the camp, his brows furrowing. He didn't know what was happening over there, but he had a bad feeling about it. Cold winds swept through, carrying the smell of food to them. Drinking cold water and eating stale bread, the bandits felt increasingly bitter. Usually, they could easily defeat their opponents, and then enjoy the food and supplies their targets carried. But today, they were stuck wearing cloaks, enduring the cold wind, eating cold rations, swatting away mosquitoes, and sitting in the mud. Pale red moonlight fell over them. As far as the eye could see, only the reeds swayed. The chorus of crickets and frogs only added to the bandit's already irritable mood. Beverly licked his lips, sensing danger in the air. Hearing the groans of his injured companions around him, he gripped his sword tightly. If the enemy dared to attack, Beverly would give them a surprise. Whoosh! A torch flared up on the left, and Beverly's heart tightened. Just as he was about to shout, another torch appeared on the right. A two-pronged attack. Beverly suppressed his urge to charge out, unsure which side was the main force. Before he could react, more and more torches appeared from the reed fields. Looking around, it was a sea of flickering lights. Enemies surrounded them from all directions. Enemy attack! The loud shout echoed from the swamp in every direction. Beverly was momentarily stunned, then saw the dense rain of fire arrows descending from all sides. Announcement: a big thank you to Akko Lamptey for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 134, Get to it. Chapter 134, Get to it. The continuous sounds of thud echoed around. Screams of agony followed as the chaotic rain of arrows claimed over a dozen unlucky souls. The already panicked bandits descended into chaos. Seeing that the timing was right, Matthew grabbed a scroll. A swirling fireball tore through the red night sky, crashing into the bandit horde with a loud boom. The giant fireball exploded, releasing fiery serpents that twisted wildly. The stench of burning flesh, mixed with the foul odor of the swamp, spread through the air. There's a spellcaster. Beverly's eyes widened in shock, and he shouted to warn his men. Matthew glanced at him, but had no intention of targeting him. Last time, even with 50 fireballs raining down, he hadn't been able to stop the high-tier Shadowhunter troll. Let's deal with the other bandits first. Hearing 7 or 8 delightful kill notifications, Matthew continued his onslaught against the other bandits. Then, a scene that terrified the bandits unfolded. One massive fireball after another flew in from the distance. Boom! 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 The constant explosions drowned out Beverly's attempts to give orders. They couldn't predict when the fireballs would rain down on them. All they saw were fireballs exploding around them, engulfing and tearing apart the comrades they had known just moments before. Under the threat of death, the bandits scattered in panic. As the bandits fled, they fell right into Matthew's trap. The enemy's morale has collapsed. It's done. He slightly adjusted the trajectory of the fireballs, sending them flying toward the rear of the bandits along the road. On both sides of the Misty Swamps Road lay deadly mud pits. Stepping into them under the scarlet moonlight would be a death sentence. Sure enough, the next few fireballs each claimed more than 15 bandits. In just a few breaths, over 100 bandits had fallen at Matthew's hands. The terrifying carnage left Beverly, hiding among the reeds, filled with dread. Fireball. Impossible. No one can cast so many fireballs at once, not even a high-tier mage. Could it be an arcanist? No, if it were an arcanist, they'd be using 6 circle spells like Stinking Cloud or Chain Lightning, which would be even more devastating. Could this spellcaster not be that powerful and is just using fireball scrolls? Thinking about the 100 gold per scroll fireballs, Beverly did a quick calculation and came to a suffocating conclusion. Spending tens of thousands of gold coins just to deal with a group of bandits. What did we do to deserve this? The answer seemed absurd. But when Beverly thought about the Thorn Merchant Caravan's extravagant construction of a temporary camp, it all fit with their money-throwing style. Is this the confidence of the Arcanist's family? The relentless explosions further rattled Beverly's nerves, and hearing his comrades' panicked shouts, he knew deep down. It was over. Even if the enemy's numbers were small, they had the ability to move freely under the scarlet moon. That gave them an overwhelming advantage. Additionally, the enemy was cunning, having no intention of engaging in close combat to wipe them out. Instead, they kept raining down ranged attacks, wearing down their forces. The enemy's goal was simple: to make them collapse on their own. Beverly tore open a sound amplification scroll, risking exposing his location and being targeted by fireballs, and shouted, "Retreat. Retreat now." The defeat pained Beverly deeply, but it was better than losing all his men in this completely one-sided battle. Beverly's shout was the final straw that broke the camel's back, sending the bandits fleeing in all directions. Boom! Another violent explosion erupted near Beverly. Mud splattered onto his beloved armor, and the stench made him dizzy. Fighting off the nausea caused by the shockwave, Beverly glanced one last time at the direction from which the fireballs were coming. Tilting his head back, he downed a healing potion and plunged into the narrow mud path at the edge of the road. The explosions and screams continued until all the surviving bandits had fled, leaving only the wounded, writhing in pain. Finally, the sound of fireball explosions began to fade. Matthew glanced at his fully replenished mana bar, clicked his tongue, and signaled to Yaya, who was circling in the sky. "Yaya, Is the battle over? Resisting the urge to attack, Yaya, with her far superior vision, scanned the now cratered battlefield below and flew back to camp. Her pale red scales blended perfectly with the sky. Thanks to the blessing of the high legendary time dragon, she was immune to the Scarlet Moon's effects and could avoid its gaze. The excited adventurers, after confirming the danger had passed, quickly gathered around and finished off the bandits clinging to life. Only the dead were worth 10 gold coins. Ding, you have won a raid. Ding, you have gained 1,000 experience points plus 1 skill point. Ding, you have killed 176 bandits, gaining 200 experience points and 4 skill points. Ding, your subordinates have killed 674 bandits, earning you 500 experience points. Ding, you have changed the fate of 850 people, earning 1,000 fate coins. The continuous notifications brought Matthew great satisfaction. Though the experience points weren't massive, they brought his total to 43,700. The fate coins used for Yaya had also been restored to 2,700. Of course, what pleased Matthew the most was that more than half of the 1,500 bandits had been eliminated. Judging by their shattered morale, even if the survivors escaped the misty swamp, they wouldn't have the courage to attack again. Matthew reviewed his plan, confirmed that everything was progressing smoothly, exhaled lightly, and turned back toward the camp. He needed to make the most of his time. The blood moon sank lower in the sky. Thick clouds turned into clawed, blood-red monsters. A faint mist began spreading through the swamp. Clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. The crisp sound of hooves echoed through the reeds. The disorganized bandits instinctively turned their heads and relaxed slightly when they saw who was approaching. Several bandits grumbled angrily, muttering, "Why are those idiots only showing up now? These guys are the ones who gave us false intel. Why are there so few of them? What are they trying to do? Something doesn't feel right. Don't overthink it. This is my last job anyway. It's too dangerous. Who the hell are these merchants? Who knows?" Glancing at the bandits who looked like refugees, Bloodhen Khan turned back, coldly waving his hand. He then led over 100 cavalry through the midst of the bandits, leaving them stunned. The bandits watched them leave in confusion, cursing quietly under their breath. None of them noticed the twisted figures emerging from the thickening mist around them. Chapter 135, Berserk Infection Potion. Chapter 135, Berserk Infection Potion. Whoosh. Fierce flames burned the piled corpses. Thanks to the oil that had been poured on them, these bodies would eventually be fully incinerated. In the end, only a few ashes would remain, swallowed by the misty swamp. Thick black smoke billowed upward, straight into the sky. It stained the blood-colored world with a shade of dark gray. The adventurers on the wall were excitedly chattering. Every adventurer who had joined the battle had received their reward. The reward was very generous. The adventurers who hadn't participated were full of regret, silently listening to the others' discussions, but inwardly they made a firm decision. Next time they couldn't miss out. Smelling the faint scent of blood, Matthew thoughtfully gazed out at the misty swamp under the scarlet moonlight. In his mind, he recalled that night. The caravan had crossed the misty swamp on its way to Bay Village when they encountered those mutated fishmen. The influence of the scarlet moon has indeed weakened. Matthew recalled the scene of others taking the purification potion and subconsciously furrowed his brow, but it shouldn't have weakened this much. Today, the misty swamp was too quiet. Although they had fought fiercely with the bandits, the commotion alone wasn't enough to suppress the greedy desires of the predators in the misty swamp. With such a strong smell of blood, why hadn't it attracted any reckless creatures? "Yaya, Daddy, there are a lot of small enemies approaching, and they're noisy." Yaya's puzzled voice entered Matthew's mind. Matthew instinctively looked up, just in time to see Yaya fluttering down, her gem-like blue eyes filled with confusion. "Yaya, these creatures are strange, they're not afraid of me at all. Daddy, they're so ugly." Shaking his head slightly, Matthew's expression grew serious as he watched the thickening mist. Instinctively, he turned and saw the oblivious adventurers on the wall. Above their heads, he saw patches of -3 and -4 in bright red. A sudden danger. "So this is where you were waiting for us. Pfizer Merchant Guild, what are you up to?" Thoughts raced through Matthew's mind as he quickly pulled out his staff and cast sound amplification. His booming voice echoed across the hill. "Enemy attack. Combat personnel prepare for battle. Everyone else stay in the tents." The once quiet hill instantly burst into activity. Bloodshot-eyed Adam Smith rushed out of his tent and quickly approached Matthew, following his gaze warily. In the thick fog, nothing could be seen. But Adam Smith knew that the Arcanist wouldn't sound the alarm without reason, so he immediately turned and began commanding the combat personnel who had just emerged from their tents. "Archers, split into 2 teams, front and back. Shield-bearing soldiers, get on the wall. Spearmen, move up. Heavy infantry, hold your position for now, await my command. Logistics team, Prepare the arrows and deliver them to the crossbows immediately. After yesterday's battle, everyone had great trust and confidence in Adam Smith's commands. Although there was some chaos, no one panicked. After all, they had defeated over 1,000 bandits. They were confident they could handle any opponent now. Soon, reality gave them a huge surprise. The chaotic sounds of chittering and yapping began to emerge from the swirling mist. All the combat personnel grew increasingly alert, and their hearts began to pound with unease. What was hiding in the mist? More bandits, or some kind of terrifying magical creatures? It was the unknown that made it so frightening. Suddenly, a sound came from beneath the wall, as if something was violently striking the ironwood. Beelzebub, who was at the front line of defense, lowered his head and looked closely, his eyes widening in shock as he exclaimed, "What kind of monster is that?" The pale red moonlight shone on a terrifying figure without skin. Its entire body was wrapped in trembling muscles, with dense white lines vaguely visible, connecting its muscles and bones. As horrifying as that was, Beelzebub had seen skinned prey before. But these terrifying creatures had bloody bone spikes protruding from their backs and limbs. At first glance, they bore some resemblance to the mutated monsters affected by the Scarlet Moon. Beelzebub cautiously gripped his axe, sensing the dangerous aura emanating from this small creature. Fishman, challenge level 5+, Deep Berserk, remaining survival time, 12 hours. Special ability, Berserk Infection. If scratched or bitten, a willpower check of -10 is required. Failure results in infection with Deep Berserk. Special status, Deep Berserk. Burns the soul. All attributes +3, physical attack +3, movement speed +3. Seeing through the strange creature's attributes, Matthew felt a chill run down his spine and suddenly realized. Berserk Infection Potion. Pfizer Merchant Guild. Are they part of the Apple City Alliance? Could it be that the Berserk Infection Potion was originally developed by the Pfizer Merchant Guild? Was the Tide of Scourge orchestrated by them? Years later, the Tide of Scourge, which originated in the kingdom of Falsica and spread rapidly throughout the northern continent, resulting in millions of casualties and transforming them into terrifying monsters, actually came from here. Matthew forced himself to stay calm and focused on the present. He had already guessed the enemy's plan, which both startled him and made him feel more composed. He loudly commanded, "Everyone, avoid getting injured at all costs. Form defensive positions around the clay golems, shield bearers, and heavy infantry. Their weak point is the head." As he spoke, Matthew turned and quietly whispered to Adam Smith beside him, "Hold the defense, don't hesitate to use scrolls, and make sure to handle the wounded promptly." Adam Smith caught the seriousness in Matthew's tone and immediately realized the gravity of the situation. After watching Matthew enter the tent, he quickly resumed commanding. Yaya soared through the sky, flying beyond the misty swamp. Even her vision couldn't penetrate the mist. All she could see was more and more berserk fishmen converging from all directions. It was as if they were drawn by some fatal attraction, endless and terrifying. Seeing this scene through Yaya's eyes, Matthew thoughtfully stroked his staff and turned to the burly Goldfang, saying, "Take everyone and expand the underground space." "Do it quickly," the burly Goldfang bowed respectfully. Unlike the others who couldn't discern Matthew's disguise, Goldfang's draconic instincts allowed him to sense something was off. With a low growl, Goldfang roused the kobolds, who had been sleeping soundly after eating their fill. Matthew watched the now busy kobolds, his dark eyes flickering with complex emotions. Outside the tent, the howls of the berserk fishmen and the shouts of soldiers had merged into one. Announcement: new work titled, Ember Dragon Description Story. This red dragon came from the vast wilderness, coveting all the powers of the world. He has held countless titles: Mountain Fury, Purgatorial Calamity, Red Emperor, Ember Dragon. The world trembles under the shadow of the great dragon. He ignited the surge of the magical industrial revolution. In the empire he established, wyverns roar, cannon fire resounds, steel behemoths appear in the sky and on the earth, and disasters from other worlds run rampant. Submit or die. Cassius spread his sky-shading wings, looking down upon the trembling humans, elves, and dwarves beneath him, and spoke thus. A story of a red dragon with a built-in player template conquering, ruling, and transforming another world. Pseudo D&D, 4th Catastrophe, Red Dragon. The update schedule from Chapter 1 to Chapter 56 is as follows: 8 chapters per day, 1 every 3 hours. It is also available on Patreon until Chapter 246. Publication starts from November 25th at 00:00 GMT. Chapter 136. Flames Soaring into the Sky. Chapter 136. Flames soaring into the sky, the bowstrings hummed as the arrows shot forth. The sharp arrowheads pierced through the horde of berserk fishmen, easily killing one with a single shot. Some arrows even pierced through 2 at once. However, the fallen berserk fishmen were quickly replaced by even more of their kind. Their bloodshot eyes gleamed as they crowded together in a dense mass. The cart pushers, who had been incredibly tense at first, were now overwhelmed by exhaustion after repeatedly drawing and firing their bows. Even though each of them had consumed a mana-restoring potion, the intensity of the battle had caused their arms to tremble uncontrollably. They grew increasingly numb, mechanically drawing and releasing their arrows. Adam Smith furrowed his brow, realizing they were reaching their limit. Taking advantage of the remaining strength they had, he reluctantly said, "Cease fire, rest where you are." For now, they couldn't rely on the archers for ranged support. Without the efficiency of arrows cutting down the fishmen, the pressure on the wall's defenses grew heavier and heavier. The soldiers and adventurers couldn't swing their swords fast enough to keep up with the number of berserk fishmen charging at them. Moreover, the corpses of the dead berserk fishmen piled up higher and higher beneath the wall, allowing the remaining ones to reach the top even faster. Seeing one of the defensive positions growing more dangerous, with the pile of berserk fishmen reaching halfway up the wall, the soldiers manning the defense grew increasingly anxious. They watched the berserk fishmen leaping and clawing at the ironwood walls, their shrill scratching noises only adding to the mounting psychological pressure. With a deafening boom, a fireball exploded at the rear of the berserk fishman's corpse pile. The terrifying blast tore the approaching fishmen to pieces and scattered the piled-up corpses. A shower of dirt and gore rained down, and the foul stench of blood mixed with the swamp, oddly boosting the soldiers' morale. The Arcanist can still fight. Naturally, this gave all the soldiers renewed confidence. What the soldiers didn't know was that Matthew, who had just wiped out dozens of berserk fishmen with a single fireball, was now frowning. This was because the rewards from killing these fishmen were abysmally low. For each fishman Matthew or the soldiers killed, they received a measly 1 point of experience. But that wasn't the main issue. What worried Matthew the most was that the mana feedback from the kills was also minimal. Matthew had reached Arcanist level 4. When he used a third circle fireball scroll, after the 10 mana points deducted for using the scroll, he only needed to spend an additional 10 mana points. With his mana absorption at level 2, granting him a 50% chance to recover 10 mana points, this meant that, on average, as long as each fireball killed 4 enemies with sufficient soul energy, Matthew could cast fireballs without any mana loss, becoming a berserk spellcasting machine. But now, even after killing over 20 berserk fishmen with 1 fireball, he had only recovered 10 mana points. Every time he used a fireball scroll, Matthew was losing 10 mana points. With his current mana cap of 290, he could cast an unmatched 29 fireballs compared to most spellcasters. However, with an unknown number of berserk fishmen before him, those 29 fireballs wouldn't be nearly enough. Matthew speculated that the berserk infection potion had caused drastic changes in the fishmen's bodies and souls. The disappearing soul energy was like firewood burning, making them stronger and more monstrous than usual. This meant Matthew was absorbing far less soul energy from these enemies than from others he had fought before. As a result, Matthew couldn't recklessly use fireball scrolls like he had when fighting trolls. What made it worse for Matthew was that even if he used skill points to upgrade his mana absorption, this camp illusion clone wouldn't change immediately. So Matthew didn't cast fireball after fireball as he had before. He only attacked when the berserk fishmen piled up and breached the defenses of the wall. His well-timed interventions gave the impression of a calm and composed veteran commander to the soldiers and adventurers, though only Matthew knew the real struggle. Fortunately, thanks to Matthew and Adam Smith's thorough preparations, the dozens of wagons filled with supplies were stocked with combat essentials. Swords, shields, no need to say more. Crossbows and arrows, endless in supply. Realizing that in close combat, their damage output was lacking, and their attack power insufficient, hundreds of men switched to sturdy spears, and there were still plenty more in the wagons. Even with mana potions replenishing their strength, the soldiers were growing increasingly fatigued. Despite Matthew's timely interventions, the pressure on the defensive lines continued to build. A berserk fishman leapt onto the wall. It only had time to let out a shrill cry before a massive fist crushed it into a pile of mush. Matthew didn't wait any longer. He nodded at Adam Smith across the wall. "Do it." Relieved, Adam Smith exhaled and called out to the 30 heavy infantrymen in reserve. "Throw the oil barrels out, aim for 5 meters ahead." Crack. Whoosh. The hundreds of pounds oil barrels smashed into the crowd of berserk fishmen, crushing a few unlucky ones into pulp. The thick black oil spread, its pungent smell even masking the stench of blood. Watching the shadows moving in the mist, Matthew raised his staff without hesitation. First circle spell, Scorching Ray. Whoosh! Flames quickly spread outward, transforming into a monstrous blaze. The fire formed a massive circle, enclosing the entire hillside. The blazing inferno easily ignited the skinless berserk fishmen. Like burning logs, the fishmen were charred to ash in an instant, becoming nothing more than fuel for the flames. The scorching fire gradually spread outward, consuming more and more of the horde. The berserk fishmen knew nothing of death or fear. They rushed headlong into the flames, only to be set alight and reduced to ashes after just a few steps. The sky-high flames illuminated the dark red horizon, and the thick mist was partially dispersed by the twisting heat. With no more reinforcements arriving, the soldiers quickly dispatched the remaining berserk fishmen. Adam Smith even had the clay golems jump down from the walls, pushing the piles of fishmen corpses into the bonfire below. Only then did everyone finally let out a breath of relief. Staring at the 3-4-meter tall wall of fire and the now cleared slope, the figure hiding in the tents finally understood. The Thorn Merchant Caravan was well prepared all along. Chapter 137, Test Subjects. Chapter 137, Test Subjects. The soldiers sat down, resting atop the walls. Adam Smith arranged for them to return to the tents in batches, where easy-to-digest foods like meat porridge were prepared. At the same time, he would casually check each group of soldiers. If any wounded soldiers were found, they would first be given a purification potion, then their wounds would be bandaged, and they'd be tied up for safety. The soldiers, aware of the basic procedure, didn't resist, instead chatting and laughing as they were checked. They didn't realize the gravity of the situation, but even if they did, they wouldn't worry. The Lord and Adam Smith would take care of all their after-death problems. Thanks to Matthew and Adam Smith's timely interventions, not many berserk fishmen made it onto the walls, and only 4 soldiers were injured. However, these 4 wounded soldiers underwent terrifying changes right before Matthew's eyes. Their consciousnesses faded, and their body temperatures rapidly increased. Purification potions had no effect, healing potions were ineffective. They lost the ability to speak, and their digestive reactions intensified. Minor healing was useless. Moderate healing had no impact. Their muscles rapidly swelled, their skin split, and their bones mutated. Major healing failed. Matthew ended the mutations early. From the time they were injured until the mutations were halted, the entire process took only 40 minutes to an hour. It was too fast. Matthew tried to heal each soldier to the best of his abilities, but all efforts failed. As of now, with his current knowledge and healing techniques, he had no way to stop berserk infections. Right now, it was just fishmen, but in the future, it could very well infect humans. The infection was simple and direct, making it a deadly threat to large numbers of defenseless civilians. After quickly disposing of the bodies, Matthew made sure there were no issues with the burned corpses and breathed a sigh of relief. At least he was confident he could stop the infection from spreading. Matthew had made up his mind to tighten the screening of recruits and adventurers. At the same time, Matthew immediately prepared for battle and promptly informed Adam Smith of the outcome. Upon hearing the news, Adam Smith's face turned grim. Especially after learning that the berserk fishman's infection could transfer to humans, his unease reached its peak. If such a horrifying outbreak occurred in Blood Moon City or the Bay Territory, Adam Smith couldn't even imagine the hellish scenario. "Don't worry, this won't happen while we're still alive." Matthew's calm voice quickly brought Adam Smith back to reality. His sharp mind quickly grasped that all of this had to be orchestrated. The enemy had deliberately shown them this horrifying experiment and would likely eliminate everyone here to cover it up. Perhaps they were part of this experiment as well. Seeing the anger on Adam Smith's face, Matthew calmly grabbed his staff, walking out of the tent while giving instructions. "Prepare for battle. If they want to take us down, they better be ready to break their teeth." Phew! Bloodhen Khan took a deep breath, savoring the burning stench in the air as he watched the fading flames, indifferent to the scattered berserk fishmen. He sneered coldly, "Those fools are useless. They couldn't even handle such a small matter, and now it's blown up." The figure cloaked beside him hesitated, showing a hint of discomfort on their face. After a moment, they spoke. "Even so, you shouldn't have killed them. This kind of thing can't be kept under wraps." Bloodhen Khan glanced at him calmly, a too young face flashing through his mind, and chuckled. "Why keep it hidden? Don't tell me you think I did this on my own." Before the figure could respond, Bloodhen Khan raised his massive axe and shouted with a roar of barely contained fury. "Everyone gather." The figure instinctively raised their head, their face pale with terror as the rumbling of hooves grew louder. They muttered in disbelief, "You're all insane." Turning, they frantically sprinted toward the swamp's reeds. Bloodhen Khan didn't spare a glance at the fleeing figure, casually watching him run while turning to his gathering knights with a vicious grin, roaring, "Let's go." Time to kill. Bloodhen Khan led the charge down the road. Nearly 500 knights followed close behind, their heavy hooves striking the ground with sharp clacks. Behind them, twisted, blood-soaked figures howled as they gave chase. The fleeing cloaked figure was torn to shreds, devoured by the creatures. Back at the temporary camp, the soldiers were busily working non-stop. They raised the walls higher, familiarized themselves with new weapons and gear, and donned additional armor. They hadn't seen what had happened to the wounded soldiers, but Adam Smith's somber tone had given them a clue. More crossbows were mounted along the defenses. More cart pushers were organized to preemptively move battle supplies into position. This included over a dozen barrels of oil, hundreds of bolts for the crossbows, and replacement spears. They didn't fight, but they were essential to the battle. Matthew looked out into the distant fog as the howls grew louder and more chaotic. Once again, they are driving the monsters toward us. The Pfizer Merchant Guild is quite adept at this tactic. Recalling his memories, Matthew took stock of the battle resources. I have 120 mana points left. If I continue fighting berserk creatures, I can cast 11 more fireball scrolls at most. There are still 43 fireball scrolls left, so I need to strategize carefully. As Matthew considered tactics to maximize his firepower, new enemies burst from the mist, revealing themselves to his forces. These creatures had no skin, their blood-red muscle armor covering their entire bodies as they charged on all fours like beasts. To the soldiers' horror, these beast-like monsters still bore remnants of belongings and armor. This meant that these terrifying beast-like creatures were once human. Test Subject 15 of the Berserk Potion. Members of the Redwood Merchant Guild's Blood Moon City Guard. Challenge level 8+. Remaining survival time, 23 hours 12 minutes. Special ability, Berserk Infection. If scratched or bitten, a willpower check of -10 is required. Failing the check results in Deep Berserk Infection. Special status, Deep Berserk. Burns the soul. All attributes +3, max HP +15, physical attack +3, physical defense +4, movement speed +3. Seeing their former identities confirmed Matthew's suspicions. Although they weren't directly associated with Beverly, they were definitely part of this raid force. In other words, someone had killed all of their allies. Such madness was terrifying beyond words. Chapter 138. Urgent Situation. Chapter 138. Urgent Situation. The other soldiers had also vaguely guessed the truth. Now they understood that their enemies were not some unknown dangers, but quite possibly humans. Before the monstrous test subjects could charge up the wall, Matthew raised his hand and unleashed a fireball spell. The swirling fireball crashed down, exploding in the midst of the test subjects. The terrifying blast instantly shredded these grotesque creatures, and their charred remains were scattered across the ground. Ding, you killed test subject X7, mana absorption activated, gaining 12 mana points. Matthew frowned slightly. The 4 activations of mana absorption gave him similar feedback to that of the berserk fishmen. This confirmed Matthew's earlier theory. More and more test subjects surged out of the swamp's shadows, snarling and howling as they recklessly slammed into the ironwood walls. The heavy thudding sounds added pressure to the soldiers. They gripped their spears tightly, without hesitation, thrusting downward. From the very start, the battle entered a fierce, heated phase. Bowstrings twanged continuously. The crossbow bolt's devastating power was fully displayed in this moment. Even with the test subjects' 15-point increase in health, their flesh and blood couldn't withstand the brutal arrowheads. The speeding bolts pierced through the test subjects, emerging from the mist, and buried themselves deep into the ground. More than a dozen of the test subjects charging from the road were taken down in an instant. This success was due to Adam Smith's analysis of their defense. Instead of having the cart pushers, who hadn't fully mastered archery, stubbornly shoot a few rounds before exhausting themselves, he split the existing crossbowmen into teams and had the cart pushers handle the heavy work, leaving the original crossbowmen to focus on aiming and firing. While this reduced the rate of fire, it allowed them to double the number of active crossbows. Adam Smith had also gained more insight into the use of clay golems. The berserk fishmen primarily targeted living humans and flesh. They had little interest in the clay golems. He concentrated the golems at the front to block the test subjects' charge. These 4-legged test subjects had larger bodies and stronger climbing abilities than the berserk fishmen. After 4 or 5 minutes of concentrated attacks, they began climbing the walls. Though they were quickly smashed by the heavy blows of the clay golems, this made Adam Smith even more anxious. These horrifying test subjects were far more dangerous than the berserk fishmen. More test subjects emerged from the mist, and after a barrage of crossbow bolts, their numbers were reduced by about 1/4. The remaining ones trampled over their fallen comrades, swiftly leaping onto the walls and slashing deep gashes into the shields with their claw-like knives. Sparks flew, and the terrifying strength of their attacks made the defending soldiers' hearts race. Fortunately, their defense was tight, with spears thrusting through the gaps between the shields. The shield-bearing soldiers didn't give the test subjects any room to land, stabbing them with sharp spears the moment they jumped. Roar! The impaled test subjects thrashed wildly before tumbling down. The pressure on the defense continued to mount, and the battle grew increasingly intense. Boom! Another fireball exploded, shattering the first wave of the test subject's assault. The soldiers seized the moment to change positions and re-equip themselves. Matthew no longer waited for the test subjects to reach the walls before casting his fireball spells. He began attacking the next wave of test subjects as they advanced. His goal was to reduce the test subjects' numbers and strength as much as possible, maximizing the fireball's spell's destructive power and lethality. This was Matthew's strategy, a direct response to the enemy's war of attrition. Care to guess how many more times I can cast this? The booming explosions repeatedly lit up the battlefield before the hill. The fireball spell, a battlefield powerhouse, once again displayed its formidable deterrence. Uncertain of how many more fireballs Matthew could unleash, the enemy hesitated to launch a full-scale assault.